Chapter 541. I'm not a philosopher and I'm not Z, so I don't know what she will do when the time comes. Chinamo glanced at the youngster. Alright, it's not suitable for people in their rebellious phase to talk about this. Come here. Fujio once again felt that her identity as a high school student was despised by the Almighty. Even the topic depended on age? Also, when would the topic about her rebellious phase end? Fujio didn't move. To be honest, she really wanted to know why the Almighty was so relentless in his pursuit of her. Did he think she was a bad person? Seeing that the youngster didn't come over, Chinamo frowned and lifted the youngster's chin with his fingers. What? Fujio took a step back. Chinamo pulled her back directly. Stay there, don't move. Fujio finally saw what the Almighty was holding in his hand. It was a light-colored lip balm. Wait, Brother Imo, you have something like this? She thought that a straight man like the Almighty wouldn't be like some gay men, who not only kept their skin hydrated, but also their thin lips moist. That was why he had more skincare products than girls, and he was very particular about the brand. I really didn't expect you to be this kind of person. Brother Imo. Chinamo raised his eyebrows and said casually, stop your messy thoughts. This lip balm belongs to your top fan Mizzen, movie Queen Anne's. Fujio tilted her head and rejected in a manly manner. No need, it's too girly. Chinamo pinched her chin again. It's colorless. Now you feel girly. Why don't you feel girly when I ask you to work out? I have abdominal muscles too. Fujio pretended to lift her clothes. But this time, the Almighty didn't stop her from acting like a hooligan. Instead, he stood there with a faint smile on his face, as if he would allow her to lift him up. Fujio couldn't really lift her clothes, so she gave up. She raised her head and said in a cool voice, don't put too much on. If I put too much on, that female officer will recognize me. It will be embarrassing. Kids in their rebellious phase usually care a lot about their faces. Chinamo lowered his eyes slightly, and his fingers touched the beautifully shaped thin lips in front of him. Fujio once again felt the slight coldness. When the fingertips brushed across her lips, it brought about an itch. It wasn't obvious, but it felt like a feather hitting her. As soon as she opened her eyes, she could see the Almighty's pleasing face, tall nose bridge, deep eyes, and handsome features. She had to admit that he was very charming. Brother Imo, are you of foreign descent? Amich, Chinamo replied faintly. My grandfather is an overseas Chinese studying in England. No wonder. Mixed bloods were usually handsome. Chinamo lowered his waist further. Raise your chin higher and open your mouth. They were very close to each other. It was because it was too close. That was why he felt that this posture was a little too ambiguous. In addition, when the familiar scent of tobacco hit his lips, Fujio finally couldn't help but say, Brother Imo, I can actually apply lip balm on my own. The color will be lighter. Chinamo didn't care about the youngster's opinion at all. He started to brush from the center of his lips. Don't worry about the color and don't think about the police. With me around, no one will be able to catch you. Fujio wanted to say that this wasn't the problem, but didn't the Almighty feel that they were too close? Chapter 542. She thought of the word kiss. Fujio wanted to move away subconsciously. She didn't know if the Almighty had seen through her. At this moment, Chinamo said calmly, I investigated Z. Fujio tried her best to look surprised. You've investigated Z? Chinamo knocked the youngster's head. Listen to me, don't move, it's not good. Fujio. Are all younger brothers so pitiful nowadays? Her real body is in America. Chinamo didn't tell her what happened that time. Instead, he rubbed the youngster's lips and his eyes were heavy. If you want to know why I wanted to investigate her, it's probably because I finally found such an opponent, so I wanted to take a look. Fujio. You really can't look at the Almighty like a normal person. Her operation is not bad and her way of doing things is very interesting. But at that time, it seemed to be out of control. Chinmo's tone was calm. Because of this, she needed someone to tell her not to go astray. Fujio didn't expect to hear such an answer. Don't go astray? It would be a pity for such an opponent to turn into an evil dragon. It was just a careless ending. It made Fujio stop in her tracks. So, the Almighty appeared in the Fifth Avenue to save her? In this world, there was probably no one who knew your situation better than your opponent. So, it was an opponent? Fujio couldn't help but chuckle. From a long time ago. She used to say that the Almighty was the most righteous person she had ever met. His values were even more perfect than his looks. He was righteous and no evil could invade him. He was a police officer, but his way of thinking was different from the police. He was never a stickler for rules, but he was born to be responsible. Many foreigners like to use the Great Wall to describe the greatness of China. But Fu Jiu felt that it wasn't the Great Wall that truly defended against foreign invasions. It was the soldiers stationed at the border. It was the Almighty. All she could see was this kind of beauty. That kind of majestic tenacity was enviable. If you keep looking at me like that, I will think that you want me to kiss you. Qin Imo grabbed the youngster's collar and suddenly lowered his whole body. His thin lips were just a few centimeters away from Fu Jiu's, and his eyes were dark and deep. It was only then that Fu Jiu recalled their unpleasant kiss. She took a very serious stance and said, "I was just distracted by Brother Mo's handsomeness. I definitely had no intention of taking advantage of you." Qin Imo looked at the almost transparent face in front of him, his breath slipping past the youngster's ear. "Is that so? Brother Imo, you have to believe me." Fu Jiu felt that the Almighty was much more dangerous than before. Her ears were itchy and she couldn't help but rub them. "I would have told you in advance even if I wanted to take advantage of you." Qin Imo retracted his hand when he saw the youngster's expression. He knew that when dealing with someone, some things couldn't be too obvious. Moreover, ever since he came back that day, he had read books on this subject. If you want to turn a person gay, you have to do it slowly. The young man probably had no intention of taking advantage of him. However, he was constantly thinking about making this person his. When he rubbed those pale lips just now, he even wanted to kiss them without caring about anything else. Chapter 543. No matter how smart Fu Jiu was, she couldn't guess what Qin Imo was thinking. What's more, that man exuded an aura of abstinence and nobility. To others, it didn't look like Qin Imo was going to kiss Fu Jiu, but Fu Jiu was flirting with Almighty Qin. In terms of looks, Fu Jiu looked like a demon. However, she wasn't sure if the Almighty believed what she said, so she had to be more careful in the future. However, Qin Imo didn't tell the youngster. He was sure that the laptop had been used. The laptop's base was warm, which meant that it had been used not long ago. It was obvious who had used it. But now the laptop couldn't be turned on. What kind of situation did a hacker encounter to make his laptop unable to be turned on? Qin Imo looked up and glanced at the youngster's tall and straight back view. This guy, what was he trying to hide? He definitely wouldn't stay in the study for long. Not to mention Movie Queen, and Wu Zhen was also there. She was still chatting with Movie Queen and was hospitable and invited her for dinner. Wu Zhen didn't reject. In fact, she came at this time because she wanted to spend more time with that person. But this time, she didn't expect that there would be a youngster at the table. The atmosphere was completely different from before. Qin Imo sat on Fu Jiu's right. He was wearing a pure white sweater and his black hair hung down. He was full of abstinence, but there was an undetectable gentleness in his eyes. This was something Wu Zhen had never seen before. Movie Queen sat opposite Fu Jiu. Ever since the dishes were served, her chopsticks hadn't stopped moving. "Jiu, try this Beijing pork bun. It's delicious." "Okay." Fu Jiu was indeed the type to eat whatever she was given. Her handsome face was stuffed round, and when she raised her head, she looked like a squirrel. It was rare to see such a handsome squirrel. Qin Mo's lips curled up. He thought that feeding the youngster was a good entertainment. Fu Jiu always felt that the food on her plate couldn't be finished. Forget about Movie Queen. Why did the Almighty join in the fun? Once the food on her plate was finished, he would immediately fill it up for her. Was he treating her like a pig? Wu Zhen's hand that was holding the bamboo chopsticks froze. Then she laughed. "The National League is in a few days, right? Seeing you like this, those fans will definitely have a nosebleed again. To them, your existence is a blessing." Movie Queen was delighted. "They are indeed a good match, they are both so handsome. After the National League, I will definitely poach Jiu over to be my partner for a month. Then I will tell everyone that he is my godson." Fu Jiu. She had never known that Movie Queen enjoyed showing off her godson. "Andy, you might as well poach the Almighty. Girls like him are more likely to like him." Movie Queen lowered her voice. "I tried before, but it didn't work, Mom." Qin Imo interrupted Movie Queen. "The next time you poach someone, don't do it in front of me, the captain. Otherwise, I can only forbid my teammates from interacting with you, including playing games with you online." Movie Queen glanced at her son, preparing to call her husband to complain. Chapter 544. That's right, when Qin Imo agreed to let Fu Jiu come to the Qin family, his intentions weren't simple. It wasn't that he didn't want to let go. Because even he himself couldn't believe that he would have those uncontrollable thoughts about a boy who was worse than him. If the youngster knew about his thoughts, what would the result be? At that moment, Chinamo felt like his heart had stopped beating. But Chinamo knew very well that from their interactions these days, he wasn't gay. Because he was a hacker, it was possible for him to hide his identity as a gay. Plus, the youngster's care and gentleness towards the girl made Chinamo realize that if he didn't hold on to this person now, he would never be able to. No matter what, he didn't want to see that scene ever again. Especially after the masquerade party. This thought grew even stronger. Because he couldn't bear anyone else kissing the youngster. It didn't matter if the other party was a man or a woman. Since he couldn't bear to lose him, he would make him his. Chinamo knew very well that it wasn't easy to turn a straight man gay. Because if any other man other than the youngster got close to him, he would feel disgusted. Not to mention doing intimate things in the future. It was probably related to Chinmo's background. He was born with a predatory nature. So even if there was a chance, he wanted to turn this person gay. Fujio's mind wasn't on physics. It was on the USB in her pocket. There wasn't much time left, but she couldn't go back immediately. If she left just like that, then what she did in the study would be too obvious. She had to wait until this was over. Fujio's thoughts were indeed more focused than before. Because the best police force in the country was in Jianghu City. If the Almighty was the legend of the crime squad, that meant that the crime squad was also in Jianghu City. And according to her understanding of the police, when they weren't sure of the target, they would usually search the sea and find a hacker with similar techniques. To avoid being discovered, she had to hide well before taking action. As for how she would do it, it depended on whether the Almighty would return to the crime squad. No matter how much you stare, you can't write the answer to this question if you don't move your pen. A familiar male voice came into her ears. Fujio looked over and said simply, "It's too difficult. I'll explain it again." Chinamo was originally standing, but at this moment, his arm went around Fujio's back, and his fingertips touched the exercise book. It was as if he was hugging the young man from behind, and the scene was incomparably beautiful. Using Formula 2 here, the night outside the window darkened little by little, and it was impossible to see people's shadows clearly because fog lingered everywhere. Wu Zhen held a cup of tea in the living room until the tea in her palms turned cold. She clenched her fists and stood up, smiling faintly at Movie Queen and, "Since Brother Mo is so busy, I won't be staying any longer. Auntie, and you should rest early too. I still have to work when I get back. There have been too many cases recently, so please tell Brother Mo to consider my words. Auntie, I believe you wish for Brother Mo to return to the crime squad. After all, this is the only way to resolve the knot in his heart." Movie Queen didn't speak at first, but in the end she said faintly, "Let's see what he thinks. As long as he continues being like this, it doesn't matter if he doesn't feel happy, it all depends on whether he's willing or not." "I understand." Wu Zhen put on her police cap, but the smile on her face didn't disappear. Even if Brother Mo didn't return, the next time Z made a move. Chapter 545. Why can't you just apply one formula to another? Why do you have to apply this to this and that to that? Fujio liked to hold her pen in her mouth ever since she started studying physics. She was very talkative, completely different from her usual demure self. Chinamo lowered his lids to look at the youngster's fluffy head. For some reason he found the youngster, who was usually infuriating, rather cute. He resisted the urge to pull him into his arms and caress him. The corners of his mouth curved up without a trace. The two of them were very close to each other. Fujio looked up and saw the Almighty's smile. She couldn't help but be stunned by his beauty, and then she shook her head. Chinamo saw the young man's expression and raised his eyebrows. "Why are you shaking your head? Brother Mo, you're always so handsome. Don't you feel any pressure?" Fujio didn't want to read those physics books that didn't suit her, so she found a topic to talk about. Chinamo glanced at the young man. "You're so good at physics but you still feel no pressure." Fujio. There was no way to continue the conversation. "Want to rest?" Chinamo stood up straight, looking indifferent in his handsome face. Fujio casually put her hands on the back of the chair. That posture was very handsome, and she admitted readily, "It's a bit late today, why don't we continue tomorrow?" Fujio said this not because she was too tired, but because she needed to find a place to check out the information she had copied. Chinmo's slender fingers tapped on his wrist to let the young man look at the time. It wasn't even 8 o'clock, so it wasn't late at all. Chinamo turned his eyes and looked very noble. "Going back so early, do you want to do something else?" Shower and sleep, Fujio answered seriously. Qin Mo's voice was very calm. I'll say it again, do you believe it yourself? The wall-climbing night owl is a top student. Fujio. What the hell was with the night owl this time? Student Fujio didn't want to move at all. The Almighty's critical strike was too strong. Get up. Chinamo closed his physics book. Fujio raised her eyebrows. What are you doing? Eating again? I can't eat anymore. Seems like your mind is only filled with eating and sleeping. The Almighty's tone was a little mocking. Fujio's thin lips twitched. She had been stuffed with all kinds of food since the beginning, so it was normal for her to think in that direction. If you're too tired from studying, you can take a break. With that, he brought Fujio to another room. Let's watch a movie. Hearing that, Fujio looked around at the equipment around her. The projector and the big screen were all installed at home. That was why capitalists were so evil. Even watching a movie was so different. Chinamo was already sitting in the middle, his long legs slightly crossed. Since it was night time, his eyes looked even deeper and more mesmerizing. There are films over there, you can choose any one. Fujio didn't understand. How did they end up coming to watch a movie? But according to the Almighty's personality, he should like some psychological or detective movies. It was a good opportunity to watch and learn. She picked a random film and pushed it in. Then, she sat next to the Almighty and supported her chin with one hand, preparing to watch it seriously. In the beginning, Fujio didn't think much of it. After all, the plot was arranged well. When the people above had all come out. The more Fujio watched, the more she felt that this film had nothing to do with being a detective. Chapter 546. Fujio glanced at the screen and turned to look at the Almighty. The man's perfect side profile was hidden in the darkness. His dark eyes were very calm, as if the scene in front of him couldn't be any more normal. Was she thinking too much? Fujio tapped the side of her face with her fingers. She had just taken a sip of the tea when she was shocked by the next scene. Cough cough. She couldn't be blamed for choking. They were enemies 1 second ago and the next second they were kissing. No one would have a strong ability to accept such things. Most importantly, it was those two blue kids. Two blue kids, American drama. Luckily it was Fujio. If it were someone else, they would have stood up from the stimulation. Fujio glanced sideways at the Almighty who was sitting beside her. The Almighty's eyebrows were good-looking to begin with. When he frowned, the strong sense of abstinence intensified. Fujio hadn't opened her mouth yet. Qin Mo's voice came over casually. Are you trying to explain to me that you didn't choose this film on purpose? Fujio thought that of course she didn't do it on purpose. But why did the Almighty ask her in advance? It seemed like she did it on purpose. Over 100 films. Chinamo didn't look at the youngster. Instead, he adjusted his sleeves and said slowly, "You're really good at choosing, Fujio." This feeling of not being able to explain herself was a little depressing. No, Brother Imo, you're a straight man. Why do you have this kind of film? Was there any justice in this world? Chinamo lowered his eyes and took a sip of tea. He didn't seem surprised. Because the Qin group made this director. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't even know what this film is. Which meant that he was supporting his own business. Fujio became even more depressed. She really wasn't suited for this kind of game of choosing these days. She really picked whatever she wanted. I'll press the pause button. Fujio always felt that after the kiss, there would be more intense scenes. She had to stop as soon as possible in case the Almighty would say that she still wanted to sleep with him and chose this film on purpose for him to watch. That was why a dark history couldn't be washed clean. Why do you press the pause button? That pleasant, deep voice came from behind her. Guilty? To prove that she wasn't guilty, Fujio sat back down and said evilly, "No, keep watching." It turned out that stubbornness was always harming her. After the first kiss. After that, it was natural to kiss again. Fortunately, there weren't any extreme scenes. But even so, every time he saw them kissing on the screen, she couldn't help but take another sip of tea. Fujio. If Fujio were to look at Chinamo at this moment, she would definitely see the smile on the Almighty's face. There were more than 100 films and every one of them had a boy as the main character. The first thing Fu was at. A Jiu Zhang of Zhang. Song was be at he or at. Of course, choosing a movie was also very particular. One could not place too much emphasis on taste. Otherwise, not only would the other party not be able to accept it, but it would also cause the other party to hate it. Qin B. Fu wasn't. In reality, just as Jianghu had said, Qin Mo couldn't be gay and he would never be gay. Chapter 547. The movie went on for a long time. Fujio didn't know how the Almighty felt. Anyway, she was watching it very seriously. When the movie finally finished, the last scene was still fixed on the male lead's face. She could vaguely see the tear stains on it. This made Qin Mo frown. If possible, he wanted the youngster to see a good ending, not such a heavy movie. But Fujio thought it was good. It's hard for two people with different identities to be together. A policeman and a bandit, even if the bandit treated the policeman extremely well and even broke many principles for the other. But black was always black. If there was only one person left alive, I hope that person is you. This was the end of the movie. Fujio looked at the man who was quietly being shot. She looked at him holding a cross in his hand even at the end. She looked at him smiling slowly. His pale side profile was blurred by the light, but it was still handsome. Then the policeman was reminiscing. He had known that person since he was young. They got into trouble together, fought together, and smoked together. But they separated later on. Only then did he have a different life experience. But all these couldn't compete with the kiss that person fell on him while he was asleep. After all, it was still a romance movie. In real life, the bandit and the policeman didn't have much of a relationship. Fujio held her chin and looked languid. Brother Imo, I'm in a bad mood after watching the tragedy. I want to go home to wash up and sleep. You seem to want to go back as soon as possible today. Qin Imo threw a sentence over indifferently. At that moment, Fujio felt like she was playing hero and was stunned by a big move. Did the Almighty suspect her by saying this? At the moment she couldn't be sure. She only smiled more mischievously. No, I just don't want to face the evil physics anymore. Qin Mo's voice was calm. Play some games and see your recent condition. Also, you probably haven't seen the Xiangnan team's video. Fujio really hadn't seen it. For the competition and to avoid suspicion, she followed Qin Mo to the game room. The electronic equipment in the Almighty's room was more complete than her temporary office. There were 3 computers and 1 laptop with a big screen hanging on it. When 2 people played games, the effect was needless to say perfect. Especially when it comes to Ben. Qin Mo could attack the monster while looking at the youngster. It was indeed getting late. However, he did not want this person to leave. That was why he would find such an excuse to keep them here again and again. However, this was not the most ideal situation. Ideally, he would be able to see this person the moment he opened his eyes, and this person would only belong to him. This was indeed not the feeling she had for her younger brother. Qin Mo tilted his head, his gaze sliding past the youngster's face, landing on the thin lips that hadn't fully recovered from the bite. His eyes darkened. However, he still had to let this fellow go back. Otherwise, he wasn't sure what he would do. After playing, Fujio was still watching Xiangnan's video. The more she watched, the more serious her expression became. She realized that there was a reason why everyone was paying so much attention to Xiangnan. Regardless of whether it was in terms of formation or mechanics, the other side could almost be called the style of a king. Not only was their damage top-notch, but they were also very good at positioning and ambushing. Chapter 548. This person's finger technique should be very beautiful. Fujio tapped the screen with her finger. Qin Mo took a look, replying slowly, "Is that so?" Fujio was smart. She immediately laughed and said, "Of course not as good as Brother Imo. This must be the natural enemy of Brother Imo that the media is talking about." Just a game. What natural enemy? Qin Mo lit a cigarette, his eyes dark. But in order to get the national champion, we have to defeat Xiangnan. Hence, you should retract your thoughts and spend some time on training. If nothing goes wrong, our final opponent will be Xiangnan. Fujio nodded and remembered that person's in-game name. The word Xiao was very eye-catching. It was indeed eye-catching. She remembered that on the official Weibo, this person always reposted the Almighty stuff. Could it be that these two people knew each other? At this thought, Fujio reached out her hand and put it on Qin Mo's shoulder. "Brother Imo, I have a feeling that their captain is up to no good. Otherwise, he wouldn't keep reposting your official Weibo account. Why don't you just use your charm to stun him and I'll follow up from behind? Don't think everyone is gay just because you're gay." Qin Mo reached out his hand with a faint smile and patted the youngster's face. He enunciated each word clearly, "If you try to push me away again, I'll use my charm on you." Fujio, the Almighty was getting more and more dangerous. He didn't know if it was because of that kiss. He was always using this to threaten her. I might not be there for the first 2 matches of the national competition. Qin Mo's voice was calm. If I'm not on the field, you will be the captain and command the team, understand? Fu Jiu didn't expect the Almighty to suddenly say this. She frowned. Why isn't he here? I have some personal matters to attend to. After Qin Mo finished speaking, he straightened up and avoided the youngster's lips. It's getting late, I'll send you back. All right. Fu Jiu didn't ask anything. In fact, as soon as the Almighty said he was busy with his personal matters, Yi Zichen's eyes lit up. Fu Jiu could basically guess what the Almighty was busy with. The case. There's a case about the Major Crimes Unit. Fu Jiu's eyes darkened. Even when Qin Mo called her again, she didn't make a sound. Qin Mo assumed the youngster was worried about the National League. He walked over and pressed his fingers on the youngster's head. Don't worry, nothing personal is more important than our competition. I didn't show up for the first 2 matches because I'm sure you can win without me. Everyone in the team needs the ability to fight alone. It's the same even without me, understand? Understood. Fu Jiu smiled. This was the Almighty always knowing what his goal was. However, even so, she had no choice but to be prepared. Because one day she would have to face the Almighty. Whenever he thought of this, he would inevitably get distracted. He wasn't worried about being caught. He probably didn't want to see that person look at him with disappointment. So I have to be a good opponent for the Almighty, right? Since they were destined to be opponents, then they should fight openly. The Almighty probably liked this type of opponent. In fact, it was the same for Fu Jiu. She had said before that if she hadn't been discovered too quickly, she would have died. She really wanted to know who was better, her or the Almighty. Now, did this mean that her words had come true? Fu Jiu stuffed her hands in her pockets and looked at the tall and straight figure walking in front of her. No matter what, she was very lucky to have an opponent like the Almighty. He was strong but never bullied the weak. He was born rich but full of righteousness. Chapter 549. Even if he knew that continuing to take action meant that there was no turning back. After returning to the Fu family, the first thing Fu Jiu did was to enter her temporary secret base. To prevent himself from being recognized, Fu Jiu disguised herself this time. Rather than calling it a disguise, it was more accurate to say that she had reverted to her original appearance. Soon, a tall and slender figure appeared in front of the mirror. She was wearing a pure black windbreaker, white jeans and knee-high military boots. It was as if she was exuding handsomeness from her very bones. She wore a black earring on her left ear. She had a beautiful face, thin lips and waist-length chestnut-colored hair. She even wore contact lenses on her eyes. 10 past 10. At this hour, there were still a lot of people in the internet cafe. However, the location of the internet cafe was very important. He couldn't do it near his house, nor could he go to Uncle Yin's place. Uncertainty was the most troublesome part for the police when it came to locating her. Therefore, Fu Jiu had always been very casual in her choice of location. It was the same this time. He opened his card bag with a swoosh. He was different from some rich people. Fu Jiu's card bag contained all sorts of IDs and work permits. Every time he used his ID card, it would become invalid. This was to not leave any traces. Fu Jiu's operation this time was the same. Boss, turn on a computer. Usually, at this time the people who came would be playing all night. There weren't many people in the internet cafe. After all, it wasn't a Saturday or Sunday, and the students weren't on holiday yet. Some of them had skipped classes to form a team to play hero. Even the person sitting at the cashier counter didn't raise his head. Working overnight? If it's overnight, I'll drive right now. No, just an hour. Fu Jiu said as she handed over the money. That person operated the mouse with one hand and passed the change to Fu Jiu with the other. In other words, he didn't notice Fu Jiu's appearance at this stage. The only thing that could capture images was the internet cafe's surveillance camera. But from such an angle, he could only capture Fu Jiu's back. The first thing he did after turning on the computer, Fu Jiu hacked the internet cafe's surveillance system and then checked the contents of the USB. It was very clean inside and there was not even a bit of residue. But the more it was like this, the more troublesome it was. This proved that Teacher Yang was very vigilant. Even on the computer there was nothing that could harm him. However, this was the school office computer, not the one at home. It seemed that if they wanted to find any evidence, they had to first confirm the teacher's home address. Fu Jiu narrowed her eyes, and her fingers moved quickly on the keyboard. It wasn't difficult to hack into number 1 middle school's school network. All she had to do was find the other party's address, and she could continue to hack through the network cable. However, something even more troublesome happened. In the teacher section of the school website, the teacher with the surname Yang did not fill in his specific home address. Fujio paused and quickly retreated. He glanced at the contents of the USB drive again. There was really nothing in it. But there was a QQ chat history that caught Fujio's attention. It was a conversation between teacher Yang and an unknown person. First, the man asked, "How is it? Still not done?" The buyer has been waiting anxiously. Yang Ming, in a few days. Don't worry, sooner or later you will be able to taste something fresh. Fujio looked at this sentence over and over again, feeling that there was something wrong. No teacher in any school would sell food as a part-time job. Chapter 550. It wasn't food that he was selling. If it wasn't food, it could only be a human. Fujio clenched her fists, her gaze sinking. It was as dark as the night, turbulent and difficult to calm down. Things were more complicated than she had imagined. Moreover, she couldn't alert the enemy. What was the use of catching a worm? If she didn't uncover the identity of the buyer, this matter would never end. Fujio used the QQ search function to search for the other party's QQ account. The information was sparse, only age and occupation. Fujio narrowed her eyes when she saw the occupation column. She sat there for a long time without moving. She had the urge to smoke. She didn't hide it, ordering a box of Marlboro from the bar counter before she left. Fujio didn't smoke like Qin Mo, she had an indescribable aloofness. Especially when she stood in an empty alley, her aloofness would be especially obvious. So that's the case. Fujio spoke with a puff of smoke. No wonder he was so arrogant, seems like I have to take it slow. There was a high possibility that the case would be reversed due to the identity of the buyer. Hence, before there was any concrete evidence, the only thing she could do was to protect Li Mengran. How could she make everything seem natural? Fujio quickly thought of an idea. However, before she could implement this method, a voice suddenly rang out. That Yang had taken the initiative to look for her. "Student Fujio, come with me." At the entrance of Class D, his gaze swept across the room with a stern expression. If one didn't know his inner self, they probably wouldn't think of him as a pervert. But in this world, who didn't wear a layer of disguise to live their lives? Fujio placed the tablet down, smiling faintly as she stood up. The other students' voices seemed to have stopped. No one knew why a teacher from Class A was looking for a student from Class D. Yang brought Fujio into the office, pointing to the skateboard at the side. "This should be yours, right?" Fujio glanced over as though she was confirming. "It looks like mine, but mine has my name on it, it's not here." Yang narrowed his eyes. "Is that so? If you're interested, I can bring it to you. My skateboard is in the classroom." How could Fujio be her skateboard? However, just as she expected, this young guy was very smart. He even used the skateboard to confirm whether the person who appeared in the corridor yesterday was her. If it was so easy to be discovered by the other party, she wouldn't have to be a hacker anymore. The student surnamed Yang looked at the student in front of him again. He knew a little about Fujio. In reality, this sentence was nonsense. The person who used to be the biggest drag on the school had somehow become the most handsome guy in the school. It could be said that it caused a sensation in the entire school. He had also seen the interview with the youngster. He didn't know why, but from the bottom of his heart, he didn't want to have more contact with this young man. However, the appearance of this skateboard yesterday made him pay attention to it. Chapter 551. How could someone as smart as Fujio not hear the threat in his words? However, it was clear that teacher Yang had misunderstood her position. She hated being threatened the most. Teacher is right. It's better to be a simple student. When the youth said this, his voice was very slow. Yang Ming didn't know why, but he was always on guard against him. Obviously, the other party was just a high school student. So what if he was popular? When the time came, he would have the final say on the exam papers. Since it's not your board, go back. Also, help me ask who this thing belongs to. All right. Fujio had never been one to reveal her own danger in front of such people. This was hacking. They would always move in the dark. The moment Li Mengran heard that the youngster had been called over by Yang Ming, she rushed to Class D. When she didn't see Fujio, her eyes wavered. Shui Yaoyao saw that she was in a bad condition and reached out to hold her. "Mengran, what's wrong?" Your Highness Jiu really went to Teacher Yang's office." Li Mengran's face was filled with unprecedented fear. Shui Yaoyao nodded. His hand was pulled away. Yao, we must go to save him. Teacher Yang must have found out the person who appeared there yesterday is... before Li Menggran could finish her sentence. The youth's light laughter came from behind her. "Menggran, why are you here?" Li Menggran turned around, heaving a sigh of relief when she saw that the person was fine. Noticing that many students were looking at her, she forced a smile. "I am here to look for Yao Yao. If you want to find me, then so be it. If you want to find me, don't use Yao Yao as an excuse." Fu Jiu stuffed one hand into her pocket, wearing her school jacket over her pure white shirt. She reached out and knocked Li Menggran's head, her actions so intimate that it seemed like she was doing it for everyone to see. "Silly girl." Before Li Menggran could understand what was going on, the young man bent down and held her in his arms. His voice was soft. "Are you ready to agree?" "Wah what?" Li Menggran felt her ears going numb, her feet felt like they were stepping on cotton. The youngster's lips curled up into a smile, like the sunlight slanting out. "Of course it's to be my girlfriend." "Girl-friend." Instantly, the inside and outside of the classroom looked like it had been bombed by an atomic bomb. The girls covered their lips with their hands. The boys banged the wooden table loudly as if they were cheering for Fu Jiu. In short, girlfriend? His Highness Jiu was actually going to get a girlfriend. Moreover, His Highness Jiu had taken the initiative to pursue someone else. Oh no. They could not accept this cruel news. Many girls' hearts were about to break. The male students were very happy. Especially those from Class D, they knew that as long as Fu Jiu was around, they would never be able to stand out. In short, they had already lost all hope in this world that only cared about appearances and not strength. Think about it. When a guy without a girlfriend confesses to a girl, the girl he likes shyly tells him, "It's not that you're not good enough, it's just that I already have someone I like." Who is it? Who was that person? I want to know. I won't tell you. As the girl said so, she glanced at the silver-haired youth sitting behind her. Did she think he was an idiot? Chapter 552. There was also someone who had a girlfriend. Get out of the way. Don't block my way. Hero, why is this video so short? Forget it, since I, His Highness Jiu, am not here anymore, I'll go and play a round of hero myself. Just now, I, His Highness Jiu, should have played the assassin. I play the assassin too. In other words, not only did they have to fight against their girlfriend's Prince Charming, but they also had to fight against the game. What kind of world was this? Now that Fu Jiu had a girlfriend, it was a joyous occasion for the whole world to celebrate. They had to light whips to celebrate. Other than Li Menggran, Shui Yaoyao was the only one who felt different. Because Shui Yaoyao knew very well that His Highness Jiu's true identity wasn't suitable for him to find a girlfriend. Why would His Highness Jiu suddenly ask such a question at this time, and in front of everyone? What did His Highness Jiu want to do? Li Menggran widened her eyes, her pupils wavering. "No, I quickly agree." When Fu Jiu said this, she leaned forward, and her voice was so low that only the two of them could hear it. Li Menggran paused, then nodded. Fu Jiu laughed again. There was a hubbub of voices at the scene. Almost on the same day, the school's tieba exploded. Do you know? Do you understand? What? His Highness Jiu has a girlfriend. Don't lie to me, my Jiu rejected a gift from a girl yesterday. It's true, and it was His Highness Jiu who took the initiative to chase that girl. In front of the whole class, he asked that girl if she was willing. My beautiful dream is completely shattered. Am I the only one who thinks His Highness Jiu is too handsome? She actually confessed her love in front of the whole class. If I were that girl, I would definitely faint from happiness. Silently saying this doesn't seem like a big deal. After all, there are many people who have been confessed to by His Highness Jiu. Hearing this, everyone remembered that His Highness Jiu often confessed to others in the past. It was just that this kind of confession was not pleasing, always bringing trouble to others. However, things were different now. She was gentle, patient, and smiled when she asked others if they agreed. His side profile was so handsome that it could almost take one's breath away. When such a photo was posted on Tieba, it simply broke the browsing record of #1 middle school's Tieba. As one of the main characters, Li Menggran didn't know what to do. She understood that the young man would not do this for no reason. It must be for her. Although Li Menggran wasn't clear about the cause and effect, she had this intuition. She was worried that she would drag the youth into this. At that time, Li Menggran lifted her head to look at her. Fu Jiu looked into her eyes and smiled lightly. After a round of jubilation, it was time for 2 people, oh no, it should be 3 people alone. Together with Shui Yaoyao, they went to the school library. In fact, there weren't many people in the school library. The space was huge and it was near the window. It was also very quiet. Of course, none of this was the reason why Fujio was interested in this place. Most importantly, the location of the library and the floor-to-ceiling window in front of her allowed her to clearly see everyone's activities after they left the teacher's building. Fujio didn't beat around the bush. She looked at the two girls in front of her and said, "I'm sorry. Everything happened so suddenly, so you have to pretend to be my girlfriend." "Is this? I understand. Li Minggran didn't look too good these few days. I'm afraid it will affect your popularity. I heard from Yao Yao that you have a lot of fans. If you suddenly announce that you have a girlfriend, will they turn to fans or haters?" "It won't affect me. You don't have to think too much. I'm not playing games for my popularity." Fujio lowered her head as she spoke as though she didn't care at all. Li Minggran turned to Shui Yaoyao. Shui Yaoyao patted her back. "Listen to your highness, Jiao." At that moment, Li Minggran was indescribably touched. She knew how troublesome her situation was and no one would be willing to interfere. For example, some teachers had seen Teacher Yang bring her into the office many times, but because he had connections he would only help her once or twice. He didn't seem to have the intention to make things clear. And now, there was a person who, even if it would affect his own popularity, would still help her, even going so far as to go against her teacher. Li Minggran couldn't describe the feeling in that instant. She suddenly realized that she wasn't alone. Behind her there was still strength to support her. Be it the youngster or her good friend Yao Yao, who was looking at her with concern. "Take a look. Do you know the online friend who made a deal with Yang Ming?" Fujio turned the phone, showing Li Minggran the chat history. Li Minggran shook her head, speaking with difficulty. "I don't know Teacher Yang well." With that, Fujio decided to change her approach. "What's the address of the supplementary lessons you mentioned?" A high-class entertainment club." When Li Minggran spoke, she instinctively turned to look at Shui Yaoyao. As expected, her friend's eyes were filled with shock. Li Minggran inhaled deeply before continuing. "Teacher Yang didn't bring me there right from the start, he only brought me there for supplementary lessons for the first few days." Li Minggran took a deep breath before continuing. "Teacher Yang didn't bring me there right from the start. I spent the first 2 to 3 days at the cafe for supplementary lessons. Later on he brought me there saying I wasn't smart." Hearing this, Fujio looked up. "What's the name of that high-class entertainment club?" "Pure Color." Li Minggran added, "It's a famous place for entertainment in Jianghu City. Many people go there, including our school students. However, Teacher Yang and the rest never play on the dance floor, instead they go to the private room." Fujio drew a circle with her pen and wrote down the word, "Pure Color." Then she wrote another word, "Address." "Do you know where Yang Ming lives?" Li Minggran shook her head. "All right, I got it. As for the address, she would figure it out herself." Fujio closed the notebook in her hands, glancing at Li Minggran. "Let Yao Yao accompany you for the next 2 days, no matter where Yang asks you to go, don't go. Also, tell him that you already have a boyfriend, it wouldn't be good for you to go for extra lessons." "I know." Li Minggran lowered her gaze. She didn't mention what would happen if her mother found out about this. His Highness Jiao had already done enough for her, she had to face the rest herself. Fujio placed the pen down. "Bear with it for another 2 days, everything will get better in 2 days." The final exams were in 2 days' time. The results weren't just important to Li Minggran, it was equally important to Shui Yaoyao and Fujio. The incident on the school's forum was still brewing. There weren't just students here, there were also teachers who could teach. The reason why Fujio would confess in front of everyone was because it was to create a topic for people to post on the forum. This was because, in Mr. Yang's computer preview, the most visited website was the school's Tieba. In order to hunt, she had to lure the target out. Besides, she didn't have much time. Fujio glanced at the watch on her wrist. Things should be brewing soon. After Yang Ming saw the post, he wouldn't be able to sit still. Because the request on the chat log was very clear, it was also very obvious what the word taste meant. This was the only way she could think of to protect Li Minggran while allowing Yang Ming to act quickly. As the supplier, if the Xian heir had a boyfriend, Yang Ming would definitely be in trouble. Fujio was right. In the office, Yang Ming's eyes were filled with anger after seeing the post. He had clearly warned the two of them that one of them should listen to him and the other should do what he was supposed to do. Didn't Li Minggran know? He had controlled her repeatedly, not allowing her to interact with other boys. Once the goods were no longer fresh, the higher-ups wouldn't be able to offer a high price. No way. He had to ask the higher-ups when they had more time. He had to push Li Minggran out in the next few days in case something happened between her and the boy called Fujio. Most importantly, a girl with a boyfriend would be too chaste. If he forced it, something bad might happen. With this thought, Yang Ming picked up the office phone to call Li Mingran's mother. When Mother Li heard that it was Teacher Yang, she hurriedly put down her work. Yang Ming pretended to be hesitant. "Madam Li, there's something I'm not sure if I should say. As Li Mingran's teacher, I think it's better for her to communicate with her parents. She's been getting closer to a boy from Class D recently and didn't attend tutoring on time for the past 2 times. Of course, this is just my guess after all. Teacher Yang, you don't have to say any more." Mother Li cut him off, her expression icy. "I'll keep an eye on her in the future. Apart from tutoring, I won't allow her to have any more opportunities to socialize." Yang Ming sighed deeply. "A parent like Madam Li is the best. She understands the thoughts of teachers like us. Don't be too agitated, it's better to focus on her studies." On the other side of the phone, Mother Li was completely brainwashed and wouldn't think of anything else. She even suspected that Teacher Yang had called because he hadn't given up on Mengran. With this thought, Mother Li was even more determined to discipline her daughter after she returned. On the other hand, after Yang Ming hung up, he picked up the car keys from the drawer and applied for leave from school, claiming that he had a terrible headache and wanted to head back early. Yang Ming was popular, it wasn't difficult to find a substitute teacher. Just like that, Yang Ming left the building. However, he didn't know that his actions had been seen by the young man sitting in the library. Chapter 553. Fu Jio was still wearing her school uniform. She skateboarded across the field to keep up with Yang Ming's speed. At the very least, she had to leave before Yang Ming left the school gate. Fu Jio stood there with one hand in her pocket. She glanced at the valiant guard at the school gate, and then at the wall next to her. He resolutely chose the latter. One word: flip. If the Almighty found out, he would probably laugh at her again. "Master, please follow the golf in front." Of course, she wouldn't use her skateboard to chase after a car. Fu Jio hailed a taxi and sat in the front passenger seat. Her eyes never left Yang Ming's direction. When the driver heard this, he immediately became interested. "Is it a case?" Fu Jio saw that the middle-aged driver didn't move, so she immediately said, "Yes, so hurry up and don't let him escape." "No problem." The middle-aged driver must have watched too many cop shows. "Do you think he has any accomplices nearby? Does he have a gun?" "It's fine even if he has a gun. If he shoots the tires, I'll hit him." "Fu Jio, uncle, calm down." The middle-aged driver was very serious. "I am a person who abhors evil." Fu Jio agreed. "I can see that, but this criminal is different. He has important clues on him, so we can only follow him without alerting him." "Oh, so that's how it is. You should have told me earlier." The middle-aged driver turned the steering wheel and turned on his buddy's special voice. "I'll ask my buddies to help you attack him from both sides. No matter where he goes, we'll be able to track him." Fu Jio smiled and immediately gave the driver a thumbs up. There was a terrible traffic jam along the way. After the driver confirmed the exact location of the golf, he didn't care if it was against the rules or not. He opened the door and let Fu Jio get out to chase after it. Fu Jio had a skateboard, and once there was a traffic jam, she could make use of the skateboard's advantages. But before he left, he didn't forget to leave 1,000 yuan in the passenger seat. Fu Jio did some calculations. On the way here, Master had not only run a red light, but he had also violated the rules once. Yang Ming wasn't going back home. Don't ask how Fu Jio knew. The situation of a certain game was also written. Fu Jio glanced at the building. While Yang Ming was on the phone in the car, she threw her bag forward and began her disguise. Fu Jio put on her clothes very quickly. In just a minute, she had changed into another person. Yang Ming was still holding his phone in his hand. He didn't notice that there was another person behind him. It was only when he entered the elevator that he noticed the delivery boy beside him. He said into the phone, "Yes, I'll be right there." "Okay." Then he hung up and moved back a little. Yang Ming had always looked down on these deliverymen because they always had that kind of smell. He didn't have that kind of smell, but he still didn't want to have too much contact with them. In fact, if there was another elevator, he wouldn't want to stay in this elevator. However, the two of them were on the same floor. Who would have thought that someone on this floor would order takeout? Yang Ming frowned. When the elevator door opened, he strode out. Chapter 554. 3 o'clock in the afternoon. On the top floor of the Qin Corporation building. Most of the Supreme Alliance members were looking at their phones. Is this true? It should be true, it's definitely Little Spade in the photo and Little Spade looks like he's confessing. I can't believe it, Little Spade is taken just like that. Wait a minute, Little Spade should be the first member of our team to be single, right? What happened to being monks together? I'm unhappy. Yun, who was the only one who didn't speak, his gaze calm as he looked at the content of the post. Fujio was like him, so it was unlikely that he would have a girlfriend. But how could this be explained? Feng Yi came in with the proposal and saw the group of people grinding with their heads down. He arched a brow. Hurry up and practice your hand speed. Aren't you afraid of punishment for being so lazy? If you don't train hard now, you won't be able to attend Pure Colors celebration tonight. Fox, come here. Lin Feng shrugged, bringing Feng Yi to the side. He tapped on the picture. Look, isn't it exciting? Only Supreme Alliance's manager was like that. Feng Yi tried hard to maintain his intellectual image, pushing his gold-rimmed glasses up the bridge of his nose. How strong can it be? Before he could finish his sentence, he snatched Lin Feng's phone and asked, when did this happen? About 3 hours ago. Lin Feng glanced at the photo again. It's a beautiful woman and she looks very pure. In the past, Feng Yi didn't care about the relationships within the team. They didn't even have one here. It was best not to be in a relationship as it would lower their popularity. But it would be different if the other party was Fujio. Because after the masquerade party, Feng Yi really didn't know how Boss Qin felt about Fujio. Don't tell President Qin about this. Lin Feng was confused. Why did you tell Captain? This is a good thing. Little Spade had confessed so many times, but none of them were accepted. This time he was finally accepted and the other party was a beauty. The comments all said that Little Spade was handsome like a prince. As soon as he finished speaking, a familiar and pleasant voice rang out from behind Feng Yi. However, the voice was a little too cold at this moment. It was so cold that it made one's ears feel heavy. This is indeed a good thing. His tone was too slow and unhurried, which made him feel an indescribable pressure. Instantly, everyone quietened down. All of them raised their heads and looked at the door frame. Qin Imo stood there without any emotion on his face. However, his pure black eyes seemed to have sunk into an icy cold land, faintly emitting light. Lin Feng didn't know why, but he felt cold all over. When Qin Imo reached out and took the phone from his hand, the coldness in his eyes became even more obvious. Before entering, Qin Imo was still thinking about how to slowly turn that person gay. After entering, Lin Feng's words seemed to have been imprinted in his mind. In addition to this photo on the forum, the young man was staring at the girl with a faint smile. The gentleness in the bottom of his eyes was so clear. Chapter 555. Feng Yi's heart skipped a beat as he watched from the side. Lin Feng also felt that his captain's grip was a little too strong. Wait a minute. Should he remind the captain that it was his phone and it was a new one? But before Lin Feng could say anything, Qin Imo lifted his lids, his voice faint. Are you guys so free? So free that you can gossip in the training room? Since that was the case, he had to increase the training intensity. Lin Feng. Was this considered an innocent bystander? Vice President Feng. Qin Imo pointed at the photo, coldness in his eyes. Call this person over. Feng Yi coughed. Call him now. He had just confessed he should still be with that girl. What if he heard her voice? Qin Imo didn't speak, just glancing at him. Feng Yi felt numb, immediately calling Fujio. Inside a certain building. Fujio, who was dressed in a delivery outfit, pressed down on the brim of her cap and was about to continue following Lu Ming. Suddenly, the phone in her pocket rang. Lu Ming, who was about to open the door, turned back immediately. He looked at the delivery boy with his head lowered and frowned. Fujio knew that it would be unnatural not to pick up the call. She held the plastic bag with one hand and took out the phone with the other, placing it by her ear. Is this the Qin Group building? I'll head over immediately after this order is over. Lu Ming wasn't in the mood to listen to a delivery boy's call, but his actions made him feel at ease. He pushed the door open, otherwise he would think that this person was purposely following him. As Lu Ming entered, Fujio hung up. On the other side, Feng Yi was dumbfounded. What did he mean by heading over immediately after this order was over? Qin Imo glanced at Feng Yi's expression. Pass me the phone. Feng Yi heard the busy tone and coughed again. He hung up. He should be busy. Busy? Qin Imo sneered. Busy with a date? Lin Feng couldn't see anything, nodding heavily at the side. It's possible. Instantly, the atmosphere in the training room turned colder. Qin Mo's entire body seemed to be covered by the white snow outside, extremely unapproachable. At this moment, Fujio was facing the second wave of trouble. I was talking about you. A woman in her 30s walked over in high heels. No one ordered takeout here and unauthorized people are not allowed in. What are you doing here? Fujio looked up and exclaimed. Then she slapped her forehead. I remembered the wrong floor. That woman froze when she saw Fujio's face. It was rare to see such a handsome delivery boy. Fujio quickly bowed and apologized. I'm really sorry, madam. This is my first day at work and I'm not familiar with this place. I'm getting a little dizzy as I walk. It's okay, it's okay. The woman was not someone who would deliberately make things difficult for anyone. Moreover, with such a little prince, no one could bear to say anything harsh. Just be careful next time. Hurry up and leave. Yes, yes, yes. Fujio nodded as she walked towards the elevator, not forgetting to smile at others. The woman looked at the slowly closing elevator and muttered to herself, I forgot to take a picture. This is definitely the most handsome delivery boy. But it didn't matter. They were in charge of this anyway. It would be the same to take pictures next time. Chapter 556. In the elevator on the other side of the wall. On the surface, Fujio's posture didn't change, but in fact she had already pressed down on her black ear stud. After seeing this building, she knew that she couldn't use a network attack. Not to mention the fact that any organization's network firewall was especially thorough. Plus, there was a camera at every step. She couldn't hack the system here in a short period of time. Taking out the notebook meant that there would be traces left. Which delivery boy would bring a notebook to work? The police weren't stupid. They would definitely investigate if there was anything suspicious. Moreover, there was the country's most stringent security system here. If there was any problem, someone would definitely call the police. That was why she took the risk to be so close to Lu Ming. Not for anything else but to install a small listening device. The listening device was accidentally installed through the collision in the elevator. Therefore, even if there was a video in the future, the police wouldn't suspect a delivery boy. She was very clear about the police procedure. There was no signal in the elevator. Fujio could only hear the buzzing sound. It was different after exiting the elevator. Although the sound wasn't very loud, it was enough to hear the conversation clearly. Don't worry, no one knows I'm here. It was Lu Ming's voice. The two people in front of her should have already had a conversation. The other party was very vigilant. This was Fujio's impression of him. Why are you in such a hurry? The other person's voice sounded a little impatient. Lu Ming lowered his voice. It's the little girl that Deputy Lu fancied last time. She hasn't been easy to control recently. You haven't touched her yet, why is she not easy to control? I keep feeling that she doesn't listen to me anymore. She even got a boyfriend. Boyfriend? That person was a little angry after hearing these 3 words. Deputy Lu likes the original, don't you know that? Of course I know that, the younger the better. Lu Ming said, how about this, I'll bring that little girl to pure color today, so that she won't be dirty in the future. That person was still hesitant. Didn't you say that she's a rebellious person, unlike those students who sell themselves? If something happens that she doesn't want to, she might cause trouble in school. That girl is very afraid of her mother. After that, she will have to think about it. If this kind of thing really blows up, it will be bad for our reputation. At that time we can just give her a little more money. As long as we take the money, the nature of this matter will be different. In addition, her grades are still in my hands. What can she do as a student? Nowadays, some high school students would take the initiative to chase after famous brands and sleep with others. Who knew if she had agreed or not? Alright, we'll do as you say. When Fujio heard this, she zipped up her jacket. At this time, she had already left the vicinity of the building and changed back into her school uniform. Fujio was very clear that even if she recorded the entire conversation, it wouldn't be considered as the most critical evidence in court. Without the real video and the corresponding person, the other party might very well say that it was a false accusation. It seemed like she would have to make a trip to pure color. Before that, she had to make a trip back home to prepare everything. The phone in his pocket rang again. Chapter 557. Fujio paused, picking up the call. Hello, Brother Mo. You aren't in school, where are you? Qin Mo's tone was indiscernible. That was why Fujio was so cautious. Outside. You're with Li Menggran. Qin Mo's tone was heavy. Fujio chuckled. How do you know? What do you think? With that, Chinamo hung up. At this moment, there was no one around him, the cold expression on his face couldn't be seen. He had never felt this way before. The moment he closed his eyes, the image of the youngster's confession would appear in his mind. What was he doing now? Was he dating? Did he hold the girl's hand or kiss her? That was when he thought of the latter. Chinamo couldn't control his urge to smoke. That was what he did, pulling open his collar with one hand, a huge pile of cigarette butts in front of him. Amidst the lingering smoke, a pair of deep eyes could be vaguely seen. When Director Huang pushed the door open, the first thing he smelled was the smell of cigarettes. He was slightly surprised since in his impression of the aloof young man, he had never smoked so heavily. But the person in the office chair was still aloof and dignified. Hence, even an experienced detective like Director Huang couldn't tell if he was in a bad mood. I thought you would never contact me again. Director Huang sat opposite Chinamo. How is it? You agreed to come back? Chinamo crossed his long legs and seemed distracted. No, I didn't. No. Director Huang took a deep breath. How many years had it been since he had been angered like this? He was called over just to hear a word of no? Then why did you call me over? Director Huang widened his eyes. Chinamo tilted his head, lighting another cigarette. I'm purely interested in the Z you guys are talking about. I can interfere in this case, but there's one condition. Say it. As long as he could interfere, he would agree to any price. Chinmo's voice was calm. I won't be appearing, I will send you guys when I need you. Don't tell anyone about my participation. Why? Director Huang had to ask. Chinamo only said one word, you're a burden. Director Huang. Only this kid dared to disregard the crime squad. Would they hold him back? Would it? Take out the information. Chinamo sat up straight, but there wasn't any warmth in his eyes. Director Huang arched a brow. What information? You came all the way here because you knew that I would go back. How could you not bring the case files with you? Chinamo tugged at his collar again. He had to do something to distract himself. Otherwise he would really find the youngster and strip him naked. He would let him know who he belonged to. He knew that it was wrong to think this way. But he just couldn't control it. Director Huang didn't think of such a relationship. He wasn't happy that the kid had seen through everything. However, the case was more important. He opened his briefcase. All the clues we have are in here. Chinamo lowered his lids to look at the photos and records. Director Huang couldn't help but ask, can you tell me why you didn't return? Chapter 558. Director Huang shook his head. That's my son's game. That's right, the scariest thing when playing hero is encountering a teammate who is in trouble. In a 5v5 match, if there's a primary school student in the team, not only can you not rely on him to kill, you have to protect him at all times, to prevent him from sending himself to the enemy. Chinmo's gaze wavered. It's the same for solving cases. Director Huang. Wasn't he referring to them as a primary school student? Who exactly did he take his venomous tongue from? There are too many clues and most of them are useless. Chinmo placed the photo down. If the other party is really Z, you should consider what her initial actions were. She has always been a schemer from the start, everything else is just a cover-up. Director Huang puffed out his beer belly. What do you mean if the culprit is Z? Do you think she isn't? No one knows for sure who the culprit is until the end. Chinamo took out a pen and drew a question mark. Have you sent anyone to investigate the internet cafes? Director Huang coughed lightly. No. Chinamo placed the pen down, a hint of a smile on his face. Director Huang felt a little embarrassed. Before I came, I was about to get my men to investigate, you better stop talking. Chinamo really didn't speak, continuing to flip through the photo casually. Director Huang coughed again. Why don't you tell me what you are investigating, the turnover of staff? Turnover of staff isn't useful. Chinamo drew another circle. There are thousands of internet cafes in Jianghu City and the cashiers wouldn't remember a person's face. Investigating the turnover of staff isn't just a waste of time, it isn't targeted either. You have to ask if the computers in the internet cafes have malfunctioned recently. For example, when someone was playing a game, the numbers suddenly jumped. It seemed like a virus or sometimes the computer wouldn't be under control. If there is, inform me immediately. Director Huang wasn't dumb enough to ask why they were investigating this. It was obviously a campaign against hackers. But how are you so sure Z would make a move in the internet cafes? Chinamo glanced up. There's an 80% chance. Firstly, it's Z's personal habits. Secondly, the internet cafes are useful for concealing her true identity. Thirdly, it would exhaust the police's energy. Director Huang. Did all hackers think so much these days? However, that might not be the case. Qin Mo's gaze deepened when he saw the last sentence, "I'm back." Director Huang couldn't keep up with his train of thought. He whipped out his phone. "I'll get them to investigate now." Qin Mo replied. After his analysis, his thoughts returned to his phone. The screen was dark. This also meant that the person had no intention of replying to the message to explain. Explain? Speaking of which, there was nothing much to explain. After all, in that guy's heart he was at most a brother who had a slightly better relationship with him. There was no need for him to explain anything. He even thought of pushing him to someone else. From this, it could be seen how he viewed their relationship. He was well aware of the youth's ability to seduce people. If the youth took the initiative, no one would reject that kind of face and the way the young man smiled. Not to mention a kiss that tasted like candy. Chapter 559. With that, Qin Mo tightened his grip, using his connections for the first time. There's something else. What is it? Director Huang was agitated, thinking it was a new lead. Qin Mo wrote a phone number on the paper. "Help me track this person, I want to know his location." "Suspect." Director Huang's eyes lit up. Qin Mo replied faintly, "No, this is the reward for interfering in the case." Which meant it was a private matter. Director Huang rejected immediately. "No way, I can't locate him like that." "Is that so?" Qin Mo pushed the document forward. "Then I'll have to trouble Director Huang to hire someone else to handle this case." You? Director Huang clenched his teeth. "No, what did he do to you? Why did you have to locate him out of nowhere? Don't you know that's an invasion of privacy?" Qin Mo tapped his fingers on the table, replying leisurely, "It's just a location, it's not enough." Director Huang was speechless. He knew he was serious, but he wasn't sure what the owner of the number had done wrong for him to be targeted. "I'll help you locate him, but you can't do anything to hurt him." Qin Mo's lips curved upwards, but there wasn't much warmth in his eyes. "That depends on what he does." "What do you mean by what?" Director Huang pointed at him. "Don't mess around." Qin Mo extinguished the cigarette in the ashtray, a hint of a smile on his face. "Director Huang, you're thinking too much. He's my team member, what can I do?" At most, he would handcuff him back home, leaving him with no strength to get off the bed. Not to mention confessing his love for her. Beneath the handsome face was possessiveness. It was a pity Director Huang couldn't see through it. But under normal circumstances, he wouldn't treat anyone in such a manner. Honestly, he had only gotten the police to locate the phone number when he was tracking the criminal. Other than the criminal, this was the first time, Fu family's villa. Fu Jiao wasn't aware that her location was being tracked. But there was one thing. She was still concerned about the Almighty's call. She had always known that the Almighty wasn't an easy opponent. Therefore, from the very beginning, he had foreshadowed her involvement in this matter. That was to become Li Mingran's boyfriend. Even if one day the Almighty found out that she was the one who did it. She also had an excuse to say that it was because the other party was her girlfriend, and that she had to do it out of anger. This was the only way to hide her identity as Z. Fu Jiao looked at herself in the mirror. She was wearing a girl's school uniform with a knee-length skirt and a white blouse. Everything about her looked youthful. The bad thing was that Fu Jiao's looks were too devilish, and she couldn't be pure even if she wanted to. But at least she had a layer of disguise that could blend in. 6:40. It would take about an hour to reach pure color from here. And this was under the condition that there was no traffic jam. In other words, she would be able to reach pure color at around 8 o'clock. Fu Jiao looked up, and her slender fingers tied a bow in front of her collar. There was a small infrared camera hidden in the bow. She confirmed the time again, and before she left, she bound all the webcast platform accounts that were not broadcasting live at this time. Chapter 560. A video shot under abnormal circumstances, no matter how clear it was, would be treated as invalid evidence in a lawsuit. Besides, Fu Jiao already knew who she was up against this time. She wouldn't go to court. Wouldn't it be a joke for a hacker like her to go to court? She wasn't afraid of being rich, but she was afraid of being rich and powerful. Fu Jiao didn't deny the existence of the light. But in this world there were too many distortions. The younger ones could change their faces and pretend to be wronged after scolding others. Those with power looked dignified, but in reality no one knew what they were. She couldn't give the other party a chance to retaliate. If that happened, Li Mengran's reputation would be tarnished. Yang Ming was smart, he knew that even if he was exposed he would still have a way to retaliate. That was probably how it was in China. If a girl was bullied, there would always be people who would jump out and say that there was something wrong with the girl's behavior. What was more frightening was that according to the statistics, a large portion of those who blamed the girl were women. They would use words that you wouldn't be able to imagine. For example, AB*TC. Fujio had never been kind, she was well aware of human nature. Because of that, she had jumped out at the first opportunity to give Li Mengran the identity of her girlfriend. That way, after the incident, at least no one would accuse Li Mengran of doing it for money. Because her boyfriend wasn't just handsome, he was also rich. At this thought, Fujio lifted her head and glanced at the rear mirror. She couldn't be handsome anymore, she had to be beautiful. The statistics started. It wasn't that easy to infiltrate the livestream platform. On the contrary, because it was online, there were many loopholes. This gave Fujio a certain degree of convenience. A recording was broadcasted on over 10 livestream platforms. Moreover, the accounts that were tied to them were slightly famous streamers. Hence, after the recording was broadcasted, a wave of discussion broke out. F***CK, did I enter the wrong channel? No, this is my goddess livestream room, why isn't there a recording? And it's a recording of two men. Previous poster, don't speak, listen carefully. F***CK. Disgusting. Where did this recording come from? Who are they talking about? That person mentioned the girl and the results? He said that he controlled the other party's results. This is clearly something that only a teacher can do. Damn it, he's a scum. Tell me, who is he? I'm going to kill him. And the result? What was the result? He only released half of it. Will something happen to the girl? After listening to this recording, I think I need to ask my sister if she has been bullied at school recently. I won't let my daughter only care about results in the future. Wait a minute, look at the comments on the platform. If you want to know more, come to room 009 at 8 p.m. sharp. Everyone would see the last sentence after listening to the recording. That night, people really couldn't even eat anymore. After listening, he went to room 009. All of a sudden, the number of visitors on the platform reached a new height, and it was still increasing. Because there were only 20 minutes left before the live broadcast. In this short period of 20 minutes, not to mention that the person who said these words did not react, even the police would not notice it. Chapter 561. At the same time. In the Qin Group's building, Director Huang, who was about to leave, received a call. Livestream. His brows furrowed tightly. It's really strange. Immediately find out where the person sent this message. Also, send the address of the person's live stream to my phone. Send it immediately. Yes. After the person on the other side finished speaking, he hung up. Director Huang turned towards Qin Imo. I'm afraid before we find Z, there's something I need your help with. Qin Imo arched a brow. Director Huang lowered his voice. An hour ago, someone posted a voice message on the live stream. Listen to it. As he spoke, he pressed his cell phone. Qin Imo listened to the voice message, his side profile still handsome. Play it again. Even though Director Huang was doubtful of his decision, he still did as he was told. Stop. Qin Imo pressed his left hand on the table and stood up. If I were you, I would check the surnames of all the deputies and deputy directors in Jianghu City. Lock on to the one with the surname Liu and see how many of them are there. After that, check their schedule for today. Director Huang was instantly enlightened. In the voice message, that person called the other party Deputy Liu? Qin Mo's voice was calm, but it was lethal. Deputy Liu is only used in the officialdom. Director Huang felt that his trip wasn't in vain. The youngster in front of him was born to do this. Be it in the past or now, as long as he was around, he would solve cases quickly. Hence, the rate of solving cases in Jianghu City was extremely high. But who could have imagined that he would be a high school student back then? Director Huang was excited, he immediately dialed his subordinate's number. But on the other end, Qin Mo's voice didn't change. It's too late. What? Director Huang turned, arching a brow. Qin Mo listened to the voice message, opening his silver business laptop to head to the live stream room. The number of people in the room was unprecedented. Qin Mo glanced at the netizens, glancing up. There's less than 20 minutes left. By the time you find out, the live stream might have ended. Then what should we do? Director Huang might be experienced, but he hasn't been in contact with such cases. Chinamo was different. He pointed at the screen, his gaze calm. Go downstairs and get in the car. Wait for the live broadcast to start. The various police stations will be ready. Open up a dedicated lane and race all the way to the end. This is the most time-saving method. All right. I'll get them to stand by. Director Huang was starting to panic. It was hard not to pay attention to such a voice message. No one had the guts to fabricate such a thing. This was because if the content was false, the publisher would face imprisonment of more than 5 years. Therefore, this was not a topic that anyone was stirring up. It could very well be true. The tricky part was whether it was real or not. If the content of this voice message was true, this would be a case of student trafficking, and the person involved would not have a simple background. Director Huang might be a little greedy, but he would never do something that crossed the line. Just who was it, such a beast? Chapter 562. The person who posted this isn't a newbie. Qin Mo's voice came over again. The police probably haven't found out who posted this. Director Huang coughed. Everyone is still working hard on this. Working hard until the matter is over? Qin Mo lifted the corner of his lips and pressed the internal line in the office. Call Fatty over, it's not training. Tell him that it's something he's most interested in, tracking hackers. Hackers? Director Huang's eyes widened when he heard that word. Did you just say hackers? Within a day, more than 30 famous online platforms broadcasted this voice recording at the same time. Other than hackers, no one would be able to do that. Qin Mo stood up as he spoke, his long fingers buttoning his coat. He exuded an aura of abstinence from the inside out. 7:45 p.m. There were only 15 minutes left before the live broadcast would begin. Fujio glanced at the time on her watch once more. She lifted her lids towards the dazzling building. Countless celebrities and luxury cars drove in slowly. No one noticed that there was a 24-hour convenience store opposite Pure Color with a great view. If someone took a closer look, they would definitely see that in the dining area near the window, there was an ordinary Odin beside a silver-white Apple laptop. The person sitting in front of the laptop had her face covered. Her fingers were on the keyboard, typing furiously. The crisp sound of the keyboard was very emotional. It seemed like she was playing a game. But in reality, one look at her screen and they would know that she wasn't playing a game. She wasn't playing a game. Strings of code danced in her black pupils, indicating that this was a cyber attack. A place like Pure Color might seem to have a good security system, but the internet was very weak. After all, the more people used the internet, the more loopholes there would be. Especially in the surveillance room, it was easy to find loopholes. Fujio's fingers moved quickly. In less than 3 minutes, the virus was implanted into the system. Of course, she needed to continue the activation of the virus. The laptop couldn't be carried around. But the tablet could. The laptop would be the host and would be left here to conduct the live broadcast. After Fujio was done, she stood up and ordered another order of Odin. She also asked the cashier where the washroom was. The goal was to give the impression that she hadn't left, to keep the cashier from touching her notebook. The cashier felt that Fujio looked familiar, but that was all. It was probably because Fujio was too beautiful, especially when she smiled. Her eyes were like crescent moons. Bathroom? The bathroom is just behind here. Turn left after you go out. Thank you. Fujio curled her lips again. After she walked out, she didn't turn left. Instead, she walked straight towards Pure Color. There were only 5 minutes left before the live broadcast officially began. However, she couldn't go in by herself. She was waiting for Lu Ming, the bait. Time passed little by little. Lu Ming looked at the endless stream of cars in front of him and glanced at the person in the passenger seat. We can't drive it anymore. Get out from here. Chapter 563. Before she left, her mother's words were still echoing in her ears. Don't think that I don't know what you've been doing in school. Your grades have already started to drop. You can't only be happy when you get the last place in your exams. Who is your boyfriend? I'm going to his house and ask his mother. He has to take responsibility for seducing my daughter. Fine, you're not going to call? If you're not going to call, you can just follow Teacher Lu. You can choose between the two. I consider myself an open-minded parent, and I also understand that children who have entered puberty are curious about everything, so they want to fall in love. But look at yourself. You don't even want to go to cram school just to fall in love? Where did you put all the effort your father and I put into you? Li Mingran's words were stuck in her throat. To ensure that she didn't fall behind, her family didn't forget to teach her piano while studying. Every day her father would work overtime until 9 at night. Almost the entire family's efforts were spent on her. The best products to nourish her brain, the best one-to-one English lessons and the best dressing. It was all for her to enter a good university in a stable state. At times, this stubbornness seemed to seep into her bones. Hence, her mother had always been obedient to her teacher. Even in the end she would still thank him profusely. No matter how much she cried and refused to go. Her mother still opened the car door and pushed her in. The moment she sat down, Li Mingran felt despair. She wanted to ask for help. But the price of that would be bringing trouble to the youngster. He was the hottest new esports player in the country, be it his results or future, he was like a shining light. If her mother caused a ruckus in school, not only would the youngster's reputation be tarnished, even his results would be affected. The moment he failed, he wouldn't be able to participate in the National League. Such a rule was right in front of her. She couldn't be that selfish. Because Li Mingran was clear that the National League wasn't just the youngster's dream, it was Yao Yao's. Her best friend's eyes lit up when she said those words. That was good. Li Mingran thought as she tightened her grip on the blade in her hands. She would do as that person said on the internet. This bunch of people would probably go to hell. Li Mingran lowered her head. Lu Ming couldn't see the girl's expression, so he didn't notice the hatred in her eyes. Fu Jiao, who had been hiding in the darkness, paused when she caught sight of Li Mingran, returning to her original position. The worst had happened. Fu Jiao's eyes darkened. She knew that Li Mingran wouldn't agree to appear here, which meant that she had resisted and failed. If there were acquaintances around, she would have to be careful not to expose her face too obviously. But these were small matters, the most important thing was that Li Mingran could not be injured. It seemed like she had to speed up. Fu Jiao slid her finger across the tablet, and the virus program was activated. All the cameras turned around at the same time. No one knew. The security guard who went to the washroom did not see the change of position of the camera. Just like that, Fu Jiao, who was dressed like a student, followed Lu Ming into pure color while ensuring that no images would be left behind. At the same time, that scene was broadcasted live on the internet. Chapter 564. The eyes of the netizens who were looking forward to it lit up. The comments flooded the screen. Video? There's a video? Wait a minute, where is this? Why does it look so familiar? I can only say this is a nightclub. F***ck. I remember now, this is pure color. There's no mistaking it, this is pure color. Pure color? Fatty glanced sideways at Captain, who was sitting beside him. Qin Mo crossed his legs and turned his face to the side. His eyes were pitch black and his overly fair skin made him look like a vampire aristocrat. Especially when he gave the order, that lazy and cold aura was even more prominent. Begin the attack, lock onto the opponent. Yes. Fatty was genuinely excited, he had never been like this in a car. How should he put it, MMH? His fingers were trembling. Director Huang glanced at the back of the car. He's fine. He'll get motion sickness at most. Qin Mo's voice wasn't faint. Locking onto the IP address of the live stream on the road would save them a lot of time. The sound of the keyboard clattered. At this moment, Qin Mo glanced down at his phone. He still hadn't replied. 3 minutes into the live stream, the number of viewers had already exceeded 10 million. No one knew how the live stream had managed to capture these images. But from the video they could see that the person was walking forward. Pure color would enter the carnival stage at night. As she walked around the lobby, there were many beautiful girls, many of whom looked very young. Fu Jiao walked casually, just like the countless people who came to have fun. But no one could tell that she had a camera on her black bow tie. In fact, entering such a nightclub required a full-body scan. But Lu Ming didn't. Hence, when Fu Jiao paused, she narrowed her eyes. Fortunately, she didn't bring anything, so she passed quickly. But this way there was still a distance between them. Lu Ming didn't stop at the lobby. Instead, he walked to the corridor and seemed to make a call. Fu Jiao was just about to walk forward when she heard a familiar voice. F***ck, there are still as many people here as usual. It seems like there's hope for us monks to get rid of our single status. It was Lin Feng. Fu Jiao's eyes widened. She suddenly moved to the side and avoided those people who were walking towards her. It wasn't just Lin Feng, there was also Yunhu, Feng Shang and the others. Almost all the Supreme Alliance members were there. Only then did Fujio remember that Manager Feng had said before that he would take them to Pure Color to have some fun so that they could prepare for the national competition in the future. If that's the case, does that mean the Almighty is also here? Fujio's legs were still moving forward, but her mind was filled with many thoughts. Firstly, she couldn't let anyone in Supreme Alliance see her. Secondly, she had to avoid the Almighty. Of course, this was not the main point. The most important thing was the bodyguards in front. It was obvious that the other side of the corridor was not a place ordinary people could enter. Li Mingran's back was right in front of him. Fujio narrowed her eyes and silently counted to 15 before approaching the corridor. "Miss, this place does not allow unauthorized people to enter. Please leave." Fujio looked like she was scared and she said in a soft voice, "The teacher asked me to come here for tutoring. I must have made a mistake. I'll go somewhere else." Chapter 565. Fujio turned around slowly, but her face was still a little low. But the more she was like this, the more she matched her current identity as a pure young girl. But looking at her school uniform, the corners of Yang Ming's mouth curled up. Anyway, sending one in was the same as sending two in, and he could still make more money. Vice Lu wasn't the only one inside, there was another one as well, and they both liked to be pure. "Student, this is indeed the place for supplementary lessons." Yang Ming showed unprecedented enthusiasm. Fujio didn't follow him immediately. Instead, she pretended to look around nervously. "But this doesn't look like a place for supplementary lessons and my teacher isn't here. Your teacher and I are friends." Yang Ming already knew that he wasn't the only provider in Jianghu City, there were other teachers doing the same. Those people were different from them and they were just a blind cat running into a dead mouse, and if they could find a dumb student it would be one. Obviously, Fujio had become a dumb student in Yang Ming's eyes. "Your teacher is waiting in the room in front. He said he has students coming over today." Yang Ming continued, "Your teacher's surname is Li, right? He's wearing a pair of glasses and he's from number 13 middle." Very good, another accomplice was caught. In fact, Fujio didn't know there was such a person with the surname Li before she came. Since the other party gave her one, she naturally had to accept it calmly. "You know Teacher Li?" Fujio tried to make her voice sound timid. "Of course." Yang Ming laughed. "We are in the same profession. Let's go, I'll bring you in." Fujio pretended to hesitate for a while and then she nodded. Yang Ming pushed his glasses up, turned around and smiled wantonly. She was really dumb. And at this moment the people who were watching the live broadcast were all fired up. "Ah, don't let him go. F***, know who's in Pure Color? Go and save the damsel in distress." The people in Pure Color won't be watching the live broadcast, right? They're still playing. I said don't worry. Think about it, when the blogger broadcasted this she knew who the other party was. This is obviously a clever disguise to infiltrate the enemy's inner circle. Now that you mention it, that's indeed the case. But even so, you can hear how young the blogger's voice is. She's still a little girl. How can she face those beasts? "No, I'm going to Pure Color now." Not only could the netizens watch the live stream, but Qin Mo could as well. Then he seemed to have thought of something, his lips curved up. "Very smart." "What's very smart?" Director Huang was still anxious. "Why is there such a traffic jam? Police officers near Pure Color, go in immediately. If you don't have a search warrant you can get one later. Who are you afraid of stopping you? The Jiang family?" Director Huang tilted his head to look at the person beside him when he heard the surname. Qin Mo's voice was calm. "Let them explain the situation and enter. The Jiangs aren't people who only look at benefits." Director Huang nodded, wiping his sweat. With such a huge incident, his heart was about to stop. "By the way, what did you just say about being smart?" Director Huang isn't senile, he knows that every word this kid says is useful. Chapter 566. Director Huang wasn't stupid. She felt that if she didn't do that, the culprit might use his identity to escape punishment or betray us like what happened in the recording. In the end, the female students would be the ones who wouldn't be treated fairly. "Sai, this hacker doesn't trust us, how could we allow these beasts to betray us?" "That's what I thought." Qin Mo glanced over, his voice calm. The most direct way is that she wanted to save someone. Moreover, she knew that if she released the news, it would attract the attention of the police. By then she wouldn't need to do anything, the police would take the initiative to arrest her. Perhaps they would arrest her, but before the police arrived she had the ability to escape. Director Huang's jaw dropped. You're saying that the police are under her orders? Qin Imo didn't reply, a silent agreement. Director Huang fumed. This hacker is too. We'll talk after we find her. Qin Imo glanced at Fatty beside him. How's the investigation going? Fatty looked up with a serious expression. I suspect that there are 2 people involved in this operation. Leader, look, this is the IP address that I've locked onto. It's clearly outside of Pure Color, but the blogger is inside Pure Color. That's weird. It is a little strange. Qin Imo glanced at the heavy traffic in front of him. His handsome face tilted sideways, not knowing what he was thinking. But at this moment, the 2 people in the room weren't aware of what was happening. When they saw Li Minggran, they couldn't hold it in any longer. Just as they were about to make a move, Yang Ming pushed in another person. With a loud bang, the wooden door behind her slammed shut. Lowering her lids, Li Minggran was holding onto a blade, threatening the 2 of them. If you come any closer, I'll kill you. Old Lu, deal with that one, I want to have a good talk with my little beauty. The older one pounced towards Fujio with a lecherous expression. What these 2 people didn't know was that their current state had been completely displayed on the live streaming platform. Outside Pure Color. Qin Imo opened the car door, walking out. He scanned the surroundings, glancing past the convenience store before returning, his deep gaze dimming. Director Huang, you guys head in first, I'll take a look at the opposite side. Since they were already at Pure Color, Director Huang couldn't care less as he charged in. With one hand in his pocket, he pushed open the glass door of the convenience store with the other. No matter what happened, he would always be nonchalant. Welcome. The shop assistant's voice rang out. Then he looked at the person who had just arrived and his eyes lit up. What was going on today? If it wasn't a beauty, then it was a handsome guy. Qin Mo's eyes were calm. The more he was like this, the more mysterious he seemed. When he saw the small business notebook on the dining table, his gaze paused. He walked over and asked in a low voice, "Where is the lady who was sitting here just now?" "So you're here to look for someone." The clerk suddenly understood. "She went to the bathroom for a while. She'll probably be back soon." Washroom. Qin Imo lifted the corners of his lips. With such a good view, he was directly facing Pure Color. The computer was clearly running, but it was completely black. It was obvious that it was doing something. Since the host was here. Chapter 567. As for the people inside, they would disappear when the police entered. Therefore it was best to stay here and wait for the wind to blow. "Sir?" The shop assistant stood at the side, puzzled. Qin Imo turned around, his handsome side profile extremely abstinent. "Please give me a cup of Americano." "Okay, right away." It turned out that he was really looking for someone. He had thought that the other party wanted to do something by touching the notebook. If Director Huang were to find out that they were dashing forward while a certain someone was sitting elegantly by the window of the convenience store drinking coffee, he would definitely explode in anger. Inside Pure Color, Yang Ming, who had closed the door, felt that the girl he had pushed into looked somewhat familiar when she looked up. But he couldn't tell where he had seen it. Strange. She's so pretty. I should have an impression of her. Yang Ming, who was outside the private room, was still talking to himself. Listening to the flirtatious sounds inside, he thought that as long as he settled this deal, he would have a chance to rise in the future. It was just that Li Minggran was a little fierce. No matter how fierce she was, after today the rice would be cooked. As for the other one, he didn't have to worry at all. One look and he could tell that he didn't have a mind of his own and wouldn't cause any trouble. Fujio didn't have her own opinions? The sentence sounded like a joke. She turned to the side to avoid the middle-aged man, her fingers on the ground as she lowered her head. Indeed, she looked weak, but in reality she was doing this so the camera wouldn't capture Li Minggran's face, only capturing the 2 men. "I must have come to the wrong place, you must be mistaken. I'm here for tuition, that man lied to me, he's a teacher." "Baby, he is indeed a teacher." The middle-aged man tilted his head and was ready to pounce again. "You didn't go the wrong way. If you want to study, I can teach you." Li Minggran didn't expect another victim to appear. She had already thought it through. Even if she had to die, she would not let them have their way. But now, the girl without a knife had obviously become a lamb for them to slaughter. What to do? What should she do? Li Minggran's hands were trembling as she threw the fruit platter over. With a pale face, she shouted at the man who was about to pounce on Fujio. "Aren't you afraid of retribution for your actions?" "Retribution?" The man laughed and said, Who dares to give us retribution? Little baby, you don't usually watch the news, do you? Don't worry, uncle will dote on you. Li Minggran retreated frantically. The dagger in his palm was stained with blood. She had originally thought that there was no hope this time. However, in the next second. There was a loud bang. The man who was about to approach her was kicked to the ground. Li Minggran froze, sitting on the ground in a daze. She watched as the other girl, who was originally trembling in fear, tore off her bow tie, using her left hand to support herself from the ground. She leapt up, her left hand grabbing the wine bottle by the side. Using the strength of her arm, she flung it at the man's head. Crack! Wine filled the air. The man couldn't withstand the impact at all. He fainted and couldn't find his bearings. When the other man saw this, his eyes widened in disbelief. His first reaction was to call someone in. Chapter 568. It was then that Li Minggran realized the girl's voice had changed. It wasn't weak anymore, it was cold and sinister, like a devilish beauty that had finally revealed her true self. The higher one's position, the more afraid they were of death. The man glanced sideways at the glass bottle, his face turning pale, his lips trembling. I won't scream. Open the door for me. Li Minggran didn't know those 3 words were directed at her at the start. The girl sighed softly. Miss Li. Li Minggran snapped back to her senses, watching the girl's back view. The girl didn't turn back, her voice much gentler. Do you still have the strength to move? MMH. Li Minggran saw the man lying on the floor, seemingly about to wake up. She immediately stood up, her fingers fiddling with the door lock, hoping that she could move faster. Kacha. The door finally opened. Li Minggran turned, her eyes glistening as she looked at the person standing with her back facing the light. The girl didn't lift her lids, only saying, Go out first, the police should be here, you'll be fine. What about you? Li Minggran's heart was still trembling. The girl replied calmly, I'll cover the rear. Li Minggran could only nod, but the moment she stepped out of the wooden door, she heard a loud crack behind her. What? Li Minggran was in a daze. She was worried about the girl behind the door. Her first reaction was to call the police. At this time, Yang Ming, who was standing at the other end of the corridor, was still smoking happily. However, he suddenly saw a large wave of police officers walking straight towards him. The bodyguard beside him blocked them, speaking to the police. Deputy Liu and Chief Zhang are inside. Even if you have a mission, wait for their meeting. Don't you know where you are, coming here to investigate? Yang Ming took a puff, his eyes devoid of fear. With the 2 of them around, even if the police arrived, it wouldn't be of much use. Wasn't it the same in the past? Someone had reported them. It was just a gesture of sending the police. However, this time Yang Ming was wrong. Director Huang took a step forward, his voice heavy. Meeting? I think it's more like a crime. Investigate, no matter who it is, bring them back to the station first. You? The 2 bodyguards still wanted to say something. In the next second, he was pressed to the ground by 4 men who had their arms folded. Yang Ming was dumbfounded with the cigarette in his mouth. This is the teacher who brought them in. Fatty held the notebook in one hand and pointed at Yang Ming with the other. When Yang Ming heard this, his face turned pale. The police moved too quickly. It was so fast that Yang Ming didn't even know how their secret transaction was discovered. Li Minggran ran over, tears in her eyes. Hurry, she's still inside, that girl is still inside. Director Huang and Fatty exchanged glances, gesturing for the manager to open the door. This is locked. The manager was sweating profusely. Director Huang couldn't care less. Kick the door down. The 2 policemen looked at each other, and with 2 thuds, a loud clang was heard. The door opened. There were lights on inside. Chapter 569. Do. The notebook in Fatty's hand emitted a sound, indicating that he had locked onto his target. He followed the sound and saw a black bow tie sitting quietly on the coffee table. That kind of bow tie was very common, but because of its position, it was very strange. Fatty extended his hand and touched the item inside. A look of great interest appeared on his face. This is actually a small camera. Let's not worry about that for now. What about the illegal customers? Director Huang wants to arrest them as well, otherwise he wouldn't be able to explain himself when he closes the case. Fatty pointed at the tablet. It's the tablet behind the bow tie. As for where the person is, you'll have to ask those 2 beasts. Deputy Liu and Chief Shang's mouths were gagged as they stared upwards. Director Huang reached out to remove their ties. Where are they? Why are you guys so slow? Deputy Liu's face darkened. The criminal has already escaped and someone broke in to threaten us. He even did such a despicable thing. Is this the police's ability to handle cases? Chief Shang's gaze was stern. Bring our clothes over first. I think the two of you are mistaken. Fatty pursed his lips and said, We are here to arrest you, not some other criminal. Director Huang had wanted to ask about the hacker's whereabouts, but who knew that the two scum would only berate the police's ability. Now that he had missed the best opportunity, he could only turn to ask Li Menggran, Is the girl really in this room? Li Menggran looked at the scene in a daze. Before she came out, that person was still there, in front of the computer. Countless netizens looked at the scene in front of them. The screen went black for 3 minutes. But no one left. Then the scene showed the police rushing in. This was much more exciting than watching a movie. Of course, when he saw that the two of them wanted to refute him again. The comments once again swept through the entire live streaming platform. I won't say anything else. I request the higher-ups to investigate such a person. If these two people are not sentenced, I will never believe in the saying that good people will be rewarded and bad people will be punished. Don't forget that he has an identity. So what if you have an identity? Let the relevant departments see the power of the masses. I say, do you guys have nothing better to do? What does that have to do with you? Maybe that girl did it willingly. The blogger is also interesting. Why do you care about other people's privacy? Trash, get lost. Did you watch the live broadcast? Don't spout nonsense. That child is risking her life with a knife. I don't care what others do, but I'm a mother. This kind of teacher and deputy chief has to be dealt with. I'm not a noble person, but at the very least, I don't want my daughter to experience such a thing. It's the same for me. Although I'm not married yet, as a woman, I want to ask, on what basis can you say that the woman was willing when such a thing happened? Is this the focus now? Shouldn't those bastards be punished? Being despicable is always the passport of the despicable. Seeing the words of the person who scolded me, I just want to say one thing. You are the same as those bastards. Where's the blogger? Where's the blogger? What's next? We have to see the fate of these two beasts with our own eyes before we can sleep well. Chapter 570. Director Huang facepalmed. That's right, the ceiling. But how were they going to get up? Director Huang lifted his lids to look above him. Qin Mo frowned as though he was disgusted by the coffee. Forget it if you can't get up. Are you doubting my ability again? Brat. I'll climb up for you to see. Wait, where are you? How do you know about our situation? Director Huang had so many questions that Qin Mo wasn't interested in answering. He hung up the phone, his other hand supporting his face, his fingertips tapping on the table as he narrowed his eyes. Come on. Let me see who you are. In pure color, the guests on the dance floor didn't know what was happening when a wave of police officers barged in. Then they started knocking on the ceiling, creating a chaotic scene. Fatty was also holding a notebook in his hand. His appearance was very eye-catching. Hence, Lin Feng spotted him from afar, rushing over to pat his shoulder. Fatty, didn't Captain ask for you? Why are you here? It's a long story. Fatty liked to imitate ancient people. It's about Yun, who didn't wait for his long speech. His gaze deepened. Did Captain come along? Ah, that's right. Fatty hollered. Captain is waiting for my report at the supermarket opposite. Lin Feng arched a brow. The supermarket opposite? Let's go, we can't continue with the current situation, let's go see Captain. But that's weird, didn't Captain say he wasn't coming? It wasn't easy for the Supreme Alliance members to leave because there were still police checking their IDs. And at this moment, at the corner of the first floor of Pure Color, there was a commotion. Those who didn't know better would think it was a mouse. But if they listened carefully, they would realize the commotion was coming from the ceiling. After two commotion, a person jumped down from the air vent. It wasn't anyone else but Fujio. She was still in her white shirt and school uniform, her messy hair accentuating her beauty. Phew, it's been a long time since I walked through such a tunnel, it's so stuffy. Fujio reached out and brushed her sleeves, but when she glanced sideways, she saw a few policemen checking the other vents. Needless to say, they were definitely here to investigate her. Fujio frowned, turned around quickly and walked to the elevator. They actually guessed that I would come out from the vent. I didn't expect the Jianghu police to be so smart. Fujio didn't say what she was thinking. She was glad that she was fast enough to escape before the police started investigating. Right now she was just like an ordinary customer. She was familiar with the procedure, so she knew that the police would be waiting at the main entrance, so she wasn't in a hurry to leave. Instead, she stayed in the elevator and went straight to the parking lot in the basement. There was already a skateboard in the parking lot. Fujio used her long and slender left leg to support herself, and just like that, under the cover of darkness, no one noticed. More and more police cars arrived at the scene. Other than the first time, there were also the media and the masses attracted by the live broadcast. Pure Color had never had a day like today. There were people both inside and outside. The car was stuck in a traffic jam. Chapter 571. The crowd didn't seem to be afraid of the cold as they stood outside. The smog created a majestic scene. Undoubtedly, such a scene was beneficial for her escape. Fujio smiled, sliding the skateboard into the bushes. She stuffed her hands into the pockets of her jacket and glanced at the 24-hour convenience store across the street. Then she strolled over. Even if the police passed by her, they wouldn't suspect a person who went shopping. Director Huang wouldn't have expected that while they were still searching, the culprit had already left Pure Color. In the end, Director Huang had no choice but to call a certain someone. The people below said there was nothing at the air vent. I've searched the entire first floor and didn't find anyone suspicious. Qin Mo held onto his phone, his voice indifferent. Also, you wouldn't be able to find anything if you searched the first floor. The culprit would have used the underground car park. It's convenient for concealment and entry. Director Huang gritted his teeth. Why didn't you tell me earlier? I'm in a bad mood because you didn't do anything for me. Qin Mo's fingers paused, his tone still indifferent. I have something to do, I'm hanging up. Something? Other than the case, what else could he be busy with? Could it be that the kid had discovered something? Director Huang had to admit that he had quick reflexes in certain areas. Qin Mo had indeed discovered something. There was something wrong with the person who didn't join in the fun. Instead, he walked against the traffic. Qin Mo raised his hand, keeping his silvery white phone before standing up. The night sky outside was sinking bit by bit. Pure Color's surroundings seemed to have been illuminated by the headlights. The Supreme Alliance members were still queuing up for inspection. Lin Feng was helpless, but he knew he had to cooperate with the investigation. Let them go. It was Wu Zhen. She was dressed in a police uniform, striding in with a police cap on her head. Her gaze swept across Lin Feng and the rest. I know all of them, there won't be a problem. The other policeman was still hesitant. But Director Huang said, the live stream host is a girl. Look at them, which one of them is a girl? Wu Zhen interrupted her colleague. The policeman didn't say anything. He just nodded and let Lin Feng and the others walk over. Lin Feng was still puzzled. He wasn't familiar with this female officer, so why was she speaking up for them? Before he could finish his thought, he heard Wu Zhen ask Fatty, Brother Mo is also participating in this activity, right? Otherwise, the police wouldn't have broken into Pure Color so quickly. Fatty did not know how to lie, so he shifted his gaze to the left. Wu Zhen was smart and broke into a smile. I was the one who suggested that he return to the crime squad when I went to the Qin family. Where is he now? Fatty desperately told himself not to look in the direction of the convenience store. But things were going against her will. She couldn't control her gaze and looked to the left. At first, Wu Zhen didn't know he was looking at the convenience store because there were too many people and cars outside. Even the entrance of the convenience store was crowded. After a few seconds, she came back to her senses and smiled. Is he in the convenience store across the street? Oh no. He was really a troublemaker. Fatty slapped his head heavily. Chapter 572. Welcome. The shop assistant's voice rang out again. It had to be said that after climbing the ceiling and hearing such a gentle laughter, anyone's mood would improve. Fujio looked up and smiled at the shop assistant. Then she walked back to her previous seat. She glanced at the table. No one had touched her things. Very good, madam. At this moment, the shop assistant smiled and said, This is for you. It was a cup of Odin, still warm. Fujio smiled faintly and raised her eyebrows. You remembered wrong. Before I went to the toilet, you already gave me a cup of Odin. No, this is not that cup. The shop assistant quickly explained, This cup was ordered by your friend. Friend? When Fujio heard that word, her back suddenly trembled, and only one word appeared in her mind. "Oh. This friend of yours has been waiting for you for a long time." The shop assistant continued and said in confusion, "He said that you should be hungry after climbing the ceiling." Fujio heard that and suddenly narrowed her eyes. Just at this moment, another voice came from behind her. It was deep and magnetic like an explosion, but it made one's scalp tingle unconsciously. "Why didn't you take it? Or am I wrong? You don't like Odin." Chin Mo was still holding the cup of coffee in his hand, but he deliberately stood in the position that was blocked by the snack cabinet. Now that he walked out, he looked at the back of the girl in front of him and said slowly, "Mr. Vlogger." There was no need to turn back. Fujio also knew who that person was. No wonder the police knew that she would come out from the vent. If all this was directed by the Almighty, then there was nothing more to say. Fujio heard the footsteps behind her getting closer and closer. Finally, she decided to strike first. "Brother Mo, it's me." Chin Mo's footsteps suddenly stopped. He looked at the most familiar face and the pair of dark eyes in front of him. The shards of light seemed to fall into the other person's eyes, which were so beautiful that nothing could compare with them. It was him. It was actually him. Actually, it wasn't that Chin Mo didn't think of the youngster. But more than that, he thought that this case was related to Z. Was it just an imitation? Chin Mo frowned a little. Brother Mo. Fujio took another step forward and held Chin Mo's wrist with her left hand. "I'll explain to you later. It's fine if you want to hand me over to the police, but you have to remember to pay to bail me out." No matter who it was, they would not be able to bear being dragged by such a beautiful girl. Chin Mo had always believed that he would never feel pity. However, in the face of this guy who was still saying that he could redeem him with money if he wanted to, Chin Mo started to have selfish motives. His fingers tightened as he looked at Fujio from head to toe. Under his deep gaze were his thin lips that were inches away from hers. A young man dressed in female clothing. Only when he thought of these 5 words, it was as if something was out of his control. His blood surged with an indescribable heat. What's more, the guy in front of him was looking at him with watery eyes. He had long black hair, a white shirt, and the skin on the side of his face was like a fine white jade. Because he had just climbed through the ceiling, there was a faint blush on his face. No matter how he looked at it, he looked like a fairy. Just then the glass door rang again. Chapter 573. Lin Feng wasn't the only one who was stunned. Even the Supreme Alliance members behind him froze for a moment. Didn't Captain have something important to do here? Was this what Captain was talking about? Most importantly, Captain had never had a woman by his side. Lin Feng pushed White Tiger. White Tiger's face showed that he didn't know either. Wu Zhen was the last to enter. When she saw the scene in the convenience store, her smiling face couldn't help but sink. "Brother Mo, what are you doing? Did you catch the suspect?" Fujio heard the commotion behind her and knew that many people had entered. In such a situation, if the Almighty was determined to expose her, she could only follow the police and think of a plan later. But before she could say anything, her left wrist was pulled back. Then, the familiar sandalwood scent of a man greeted her. Chin Mo didn't look at anyone. He put one hand on the bar table behind Fujio, and his whole body bent down. He didn't even care about the shock in her eyes as he kissed her deeply. That side profile was elegant and handsome. Through the convenience store's window, it was like admiring a romantic and aesthetically pleasing poster. Outside, the police sirens were still ringing. Fujio couldn't concentrate anymore. Behind her was the vast night sky. Other than the gasps around her, there was also the sirens outside. Her beating heart and his cold lips intertwined. That kind of kiss seemed to belong to him. It was domineering, strong, irresistible, and extremely long-lasting. Lin Feng didn't know what to say anymore. His eyes widened and his fingers stretched out. Is this? What the F***ck was going on? The moment he arrived, he saw Captain torturing a single dog? Yun who didn't come back to his senses either. In fact, no one expected Chin Mo to do such a thing. Only the Almighty would respect someone who lowered his head and kissed like there was no one else around. Wu Zhen's eyes were red, filled with endless jealousy. Fatty was still holding the laptop in his hands. He was in a daze. No, wait a minute, didn't Captain tell him to separate and lock onto the target? The scene in front of him made him dizzy. Fujio was the one who was really dizzy. It was as if all the breath in her mouth had been stolen by the other party. Apart from the pleasant tobacco fragrance on the man's body, there was nothing else in her nostrils. His heart was beating faster because of the lack of oxygen. His fingers were kissed until the last bit of strength left his fingers. Only then did Qin Imo let go of the person in front of him. With both hands behind Fujio, he tilted his head slightly to the left and asked the person, "What's the matter?" Two very indifferent words. That low and deep voice, probably because of the kiss just now, still had a mesmerizing magnetism. He had a handsome side profile, deep eyes, and a matter-of-fact attitude. This made it hard for this group of people to reply. In the end, it was Lin Feng who was brave enough to jump forward and say, "Fatty said that you're waiting for him here. He has business to attend to." The others nodded, their gazes landing on Qin Mo's face. However, Qin Mo was very calm. He asked in a faint voice, "Isn't a date important?" "A date? Damn it. They must have misheard. Why would the captain go on a date with anyone?" At this moment, Lin Feng was even more curious about this girl, who hadn't spoken yet. Chapter 574. Unexpectedly, Qin Mo was one step ahead of her. He reached out and pressed the back of her head, pressing her into his chest, burying her face in his embrace. That hug was filled with domineering indifference. He glanced over with an extremely cold gaze. "What? Are you here to disturb my date? How dare he?" Lin Feng wished he hadn't stuck his head out just now. He smiled and said, "Captain, you can continue. Just pretend that we don't exist." The tip of Fujio's nose was pressed tightly against the man's chest. Underneath the windbreaker was a pure white cotton shirt. Her face was pressed against it and she could feel the temperature under the shirt. She originally thought that such a person's body temperature was on the cold side, and it wouldn't be comfortable to hug him. After experiencing it twice, Fujio didn't think that way anymore. The Almighty's moderate body temperature and the tobacco scent on his body made it suitable to be brought home. The corners of his mouth curled up unconsciously. She knew that the Almighty was doing this to help her. His head moved forward involuntarily. What he meant was nothing more than a thank you. At this moment, the Almighty turned his head and pressed his thin lips against her ear. His voice was very deep. "If you don't want others to see you cross-dressing, be good." It seemed like the Almighty didn't receive her gratitude at all. But this time the Almighty had sacrificed a lot. If he hadn't said the word acting in advance, Fujio would have struggled out of the kiss. That uncontrollable numbness not only affected her thoughts, but it also drained her of all her energy. Fujio didn't know what to say. In the end, why did he have to kiss her? Hugging her was fine too. If it wasn't for the thing on her back, she might not even have been able to stand. Even now, her heartbeat had yet to return to normal. Also, what did Lin Feng mean by that? Continue watching her and the Almighty? She couldn't always be in this position with the Almighty, right? She reached out and tugged on Qin Mo's sleeve, lowering her voice. "Brother Imo, let them go." Qin Imo held the back of Fujio's head, the corner of his lips curling up. In a voice that only the two of them could hear, he said, "It depends on your performance." What did he mean by watching her performance? Was he really going to be stared at for the whole night? Fujio was a little depressed. How long was he going to hold her? She knew Supreme Alliance all too well. Loves to gossip, especially the internal gossip of the members. If anyone had a girlfriend, they would want the whole company to know. After all, it was the monk battle team. I can understand. But if she was that girlfriend, Fujio's expression froze and she tugged at the Almighty's sleeve again. Qin Imo wasn't in a hurry. He was indeed not in a hurry. Putting aside all the questions he needed to ask, he felt that this posture was very good. "I never knew Captain was so lovey-dovey." Lin Feng tilted his head and whispered into Yunhu's ear. Yunhu didn't comment, only feeling that the entire situation was a little strange. Wu Zhen, who was standing by the side, clenched her fists tightly. When it reached a certain level, she bit her lips harshly. "Brother Imo, Director Huang is waiting for your news inside." Qin Imo lifted his lids, his expression indifferent. "I'll only help if you follow the rules." "What rules?" Wu Zhen didn't know anything and couldn't care less. She only had eyes for the person in front of her. Why was it like this? She had been by his side for so many years. They were so close to having hope. Where did this woman come from? Wu Zhen's fingers sank into her palms, forming a series of crescent moons. "I remember now." Chapter 575. "Captain, this cough is the one from the masquerade party, the one who acted as the demoness?" Lin Feng became more and more excited as he spoke. He circled around the two of them. She looks like her from the side. Qin Mo glanced over at them as a warning, but he didn't deny it. This made Lin Feng even more certain. Captain, don't tell me you guys decided on a kiss? What? Can't I? Qin Mo raised a brow slowly. Lin Feng's jaw dropped. Was this even possible? Are you leaving or not? When Qin Mo's second sentence was heard, Wu Zhen's eyes narrowed. What? What right did Brother Mo have to treat this woman like this over and over again? Who was she? If one could not get what they wanted, it would turn into resentment. He was referring to the current Wu Zhen. However, this wasn't something a person could experience. Wu Zhen wasn't like Azure. She knew when to advance and when to retreat. He couldn't do it openly. It was because she was familiar with that person's temper. He had to investigate the woman's background. That was Wu Zhen's only thought. Because she wouldn't give Brother Mo to anyone. At the very least, she wanted a fair competition. Wu Zhen didn't realize that the fair competition she was talking about was just wishful thinking. She took a deep breath, trying her best to stabilize her emotions. She told herself that there was still a long way to go. Since Brother Mo is busy, let's go. Leave? Fatty did not want to leave because his computer was reacting again. How could this be? Didn't we already locate the IP address? It was that black bow tie. Why was there a red web-like reminder on the screen now? The warning was silent. But one look at Fatty's expression and Qin Mo knew what he wanted to say. His voice became even colder. If you don't go out, do you want to stay and be a vegetarian for the rest of the week? Or do you want to practice your hand speed 24 hours a day? Hearing this, all the Supreme Alliance members froze. They collectively chose to retreat. Eating was the most important thing to Fatty, and when he moved his notebook, the red area disappeared again. Could there be a problem? Fatty didn't dare to ask for confirmation, for fear that he wouldn't have meat to eat in the future. He reached out and patted the notebook in his hand. Just like that, the Supreme Alliance was escorted out of the convenience store by the lovey-dovey Almighty. Lin Feng's expression was still a little blank. Do you guys think Captain is really in love? It's possible. Fatty was very serious. Otherwise, how could he not even care about the case? This was not the Captain's usual style. Lin Feng looked up at the sky sadly. I thought I would be earlier than Captain. I didn't expect that even the clouds in the sky would be picked by someone like Captain. I'm a down-to-earth sunflower, so why haven't there been any girls asking about me? Yunhu glanced at him. Lin Feng immediately placed his hand on his childhood friend's shoulder. Fortunately, Little Spade has a girlfriend. Otherwise, if he came with us to Pure Color, he would be so sad to see Captain kissing someone like that. Yunhu arched a brow and was about to speak. You don't have to say anything. I know everything. Lin Feng cut him off in a deep voice. I've never seen someone as emotional as Little Spade. I heard from his little butler that Little Spade gamed day and night for our captain to reach his current level. He stepped into a profession that he wasn't good at before, just for someone. This kind of emotion is worthy of admiration. Oh, Yunhu replied before continuing. Then why did he find a girlfriend if he likes Captain so much? He's sad. Lin Feng shook his head. Do you still remember the day of the costume party? I sent the photo of Captain kissing that girl to Little Spade. Little Spade didn't reply at first and only replied the next day with a line of 6,666. In the end, within a few hours, he found a girlfriend. I understand the feeling of liking a straight man but still having to watch him kiss someone else. Sai, as a brother, I feel bad for him. This sounded very logical and the timing was also right. But Yunhu glanced back in the direction of the convenience store. Was he the only one who thought that the girl's back was slightly similar to Little Spade's? Perhaps he was thinking too much. It shouldn't be that complicated. Captain didn't seem to be gay. Other than the Supreme Alliance members, there wasn't anyone else in the convenience store. This was because everyone was still surrounding Pure Color. The commotion caused by the live stream could be seen from the police cars speeding in from outside. Lin Feng was still puzzled. Who are they arresting? Why does it feel like something big has happened? Indeed, something big had happened. If it wasn't something big, Captain probably wouldn't be here. But Yunhu didn't tell Lin Feng this. Some things didn't have to be said out loud. But some things weren't. In front of the wooden table, Qin Mo was still in that position. But when he spoke again, his voice was deep. I'm waiting for your explanation. You don't have to hug me like this, right? Fujio wanted to move. Qin Mo's expression was indifferent. They haven't gone far. Wu Jin is still outside. Then I'll just hug you and explain. Anyway, the feeling of being hugged by the Almighty wasn't bad. In fact, it wasn't that Fujio didn't lay the groundwork. The Almighty's appearance today had given her a wake-up call. He had returned to the crime squad. In the future she had to be clear about who she was dealing with. I have to do this. That was Fujio's first sentence. Chinamo raised his eyebrows and didn't say anything. He saw the person in his arms clench her fists. Those two bastards' target today is my girlfriend. Girlfriend? When he heard these three words, Chinmo's left hand paused on the youngster's head, and his eyes darkened. Did this mean that the photos posted on the forum were real? Fujio was still acting like a boyfriend. Brother Mo, if it were you, would you be able to tolerate the girl you like being bullied like this? So I have to act. Even if your current actions might result in a lawsuit? Chinamo felt the temperature in his heart drop. He was still hugging this person, but he felt that they were very far apart. Fujio's eyes turned black in that instant. That doesn't matter. Aren't they the ones who should be in jail? Even if it's them, let the police handle these matters. It was the first time Chinamo was in such a situation. He looked straight into the youngster's eyes. You don't have to do this. Fujio didn't retreat and her eyes were bright. I don't want to, but it's too late. Since Brother Emo has seen the live broadcast, you should know what kind of person that teacher is. With such a teacher by Mengran's side, I can't be at ease. Chinamo looked at the evil person in front of him, as though he was analyzing her words. In the end, his fingers tightened and the corner of his mouth curled up. What is this? The power of love? Yes. Fujio didn't deny it. But after hearing the word, yes, Chinmo's eyes changed. They became as deep as water, like the sea at night. They were moist and people couldn't see through them at all. But Fujio clearly felt that he wasn't the same as usual. Brother Mo. Chinmo's left hand suddenly grabbed the youngster's waist, and his voice was deep and cold. You better stop talking about that self-sacrificing love of yours. Fujio was quiet. The two of them didn't speak again. The surrounding temperature was very low. The shop assistant didn't dare to move forward. In the end, Chinamo let go of his hand. There was no warmth in his eyes and his side profile was very indifferent. How long have you been planning this? Quite a long time, before I went to Tokyo. Fujio knew she couldn't speak the truth now and could only lower her gaze. I've always had feelings for Mengran. Brother Emo, you know how I used to be. There were many girls who looked down on me, but she didn't. Hence, after I recovered my true self, I've been paying attention to her. She loves to laugh and jump, and sometimes she would stop when she sees something delicious, pulling people to look at it. I've never seen her unhappy, but I don't know when she started to be afraid, especially in school. Fujio's emotions were real when she said these words. Precisely because her emotions were real. Hence, Chinamo wouldn't have guessed that the she Fujio was referring to wasn't Li Mengran, but the person who had left. He looked at the face in front of him, the gentleness brought by nostalgia. It made Chinamo feel a little astringent. It was like the uncooked apricot meat he had eaten when he was young. It went down his throat and it was hard to swallow. I wanted to wait until the National League ended. Fujio continued, her eyes revealing a deep darkness. I didn't expect them to be so shameless. When I found out that Mengran was afraid because of these people, I started to prepare. Yang Ming had conditions to threaten Mengran. If she didn't agree, he would probably make her fail. If the police were to investigate, it would be too late. Before I took action, I thought about many things, including waiting here. Brother Emo, do you remember? You were the one who told me that a convenience store like this had the best visual effect. I never expected to use it this time. Chinamo chuckled, his lips turning cold. Should I praise you for being smart? Fujio knew he was angry, but in order to prevent the Almighty from finding out she was Z, she had to maintain this layer of disguise. Seeing that the youngster wasn't speaking, Chinamo stuffed a hand into his pocket, his voice nonchalant. You like Li Mengran so much that you're willing to dress up for her? Fujio opened her mouth, wanting to say that it was just a way to blend into the filming. But the Almighty didn't wait for her to finish, interrupting her. Fujio, for a girl you're willing to forsake your own principles, am I right? This was the first time the Almighty had called her by her full name. Fujio lifted her head, looking at the man. Chinamo took out a lighter and a cigarette. He tilted his head and lit one. His deep features were shrouded in smoke, giving off an indescribable feeling. His reflection on the glass window seemed to be cold and desolate at the same time. Chapter 576. Fujio wanted to say that she had never given up on her principles. But at this time the more he said, the more mistakes he would make. He could only remain silent. Too much time had passed. It was so long that she thought she would definitely be handed over to the police. Chinamo spoke again, his voice cold. If you don't want anyone to know about this, break up with your girlfriend. Fujio looked up, her thin lips slightly open. It's obvious that her existence isn't beneficial to you. Chinamo didn't give Fujio a chance to speak. He walked towards the youngster and his eyes darkened. It's not good for the National League. Think carefully about what's important. After Chinamo said this, his tone softened. Come home with me now. A closed environment is better for your thinking. Fujio raised her eyebrows. Was the Almighty planning to take care of her personally? Not letting her go home, not handing her over to the police. He probably still had some doubts. But going back with the Almighty at this hour meant that she would have to sleep in his house. Fujio paused. She knew that it wasn't wise to reject him now. Fortunately, she was wearing women's clothing this time and had bandages wrapped around her chest. Otherwise, the Almighty would be suspicious of her identity from that brief encounter just now. Fujio was very clear that what she needed to do now was to maintain a newbie's attitude. She could have hacking skills, but she couldn't use them to do these things. She had to act naive. Hence, she basically followed him wherever he asked her to go. The man next to her was driving at a much faster speed than before. From the rearview mirror, he could still see the police car speeding past. It seemed like the Almighty really didn't want to hand her over to the police. But this time, the Almighty didn't bring her to the place she was familiar with. Brother Imo, what's this? Fujio looked up at the duplex buildings in front of her. Chinamo pressed the car key, his gaze deep. My own place. No, Brother Imo, you didn't find such a desolate place to lock me up, did you? Fujio said this, but she put her arm directly on Chinmo's shoulder. She had a handsome and evil smile on her face, and she didn't seem to be unfamiliar at all. Chinamo tilted his head and smiled faintly. What do you think? Fujio? Oh no, it was really possible. It was too late to escape now. Go in. Chinamo pressed his fingers on Fujio's back and pushed her forward. He didn't use much strength, but it gave off an invisible sense of danger. Fujio's eyes couldn't adapt to the darkness. It's so dark. Chinamo looked at the person in front of him and suddenly bent down. Fujio's breathing quickened, and her eyes unconsciously fell on the Almighty's thin lips. Just turning on the lights. Chinamo put his hand on the wall behind Fujio. After sensing Fujio's gaze, he curled his lips into a mocking smile. What do you think I'm going to do? It's nothing. Fujio smiled without changing her expression. She looked at the handsome face in front of her that was exposed under the light without changing her expression. He was very close to her, and his breath was a little disturbing. Did she get kissing syndrome? When the Almighty lowered his head, she thought. Chapter 577. Her blood would flow differently when it came into contact with the coldness. Especially the blood flow to her heart, it seemed to slow down over time. Fujio tilted her head to avoid the fingertips that were disturbing her thoughts, but she still felt his breath on her lips. She rubbed it with the back of her hand and smiled. A little, Brother Imo, you always use your charm on me. Be careful, I might turn gay and ask you to take responsibility. Hearing that, Chinmo's eyes deepened, but he still maintained that posture. Then take responsibility. Locking you up is just right. Fujio, are you serious? The Almighty had sacrificed so much just to interrogate her. How are you going to ask me to take responsibility? Chinmo raised his eyebrows, gesturing for the person in front of him to continue. She was just saying it casually, she hadn't thought it through. Chinmo saw through her thoughts with one look, and his eyes turned cold. He moved his left hand and lowered it a little. Hawk. Kiss. Or sleep? The man turned his face sideways, his breath and voice carrying a different kind of bewitchment. It was probably because the Almighty had such a strong sense of abstinence, so when he got involved with evil, he was like a demon that could confuse one's soul. This kind of interrogation was really unbearable. Fujio knew the hidden danger in that voice, so she took the initiative to admit her mistake. I don't dare to ask Brother Imo to take responsibility, it's my fault this time. Chinmo raised his eyebrows, but he didn't move. Actually, I was hesitant when I planned it. Fujio looked up, her eyes bright. But I had no choice, someone had to expose it, otherwise Chin Mengran? Chinmo interrupted the youngster indifferently, as if he didn't want to hear that name. She could have asked the police for protection. Do you not trust the police that much? To be honest, a little. Fujio admitted it without hesitation because she knew she couldn't hide it from the Almighty. Qin Imo retracted his hand and looked at her. That's why you imitated Z's crime. Yes. Fujio's eyes flashed. As expected, the Almighty was suspicious, but no matter how smart he was, he couldn't have guessed that Z had been reborn, which was why he always thought she was imitating. Why did she feel that other than the fact that she had been reborn, she was better than the Almighty in every other aspect? Luckily, Fujio had already prepared an excuse for this. After talking to Brother Mo that day, I went to look up Z's information and found out that she had handled a similar case before. That case inspired me to a certain extent, and that's how I came up with the next plan. Even if it's a hacker, the first case he starts would be because something happened to someone important to him. Is that what you're trying to tell me? Chinamo asked calmly. Fujio's fingers paused. The Almighty had even found out what was the first case she was involved in her previous life? As expected of an opponent like the Almighty. As soon as he encountered it, he had to adjust all his thoughts to face it. He had never felt this evenly matched before. Now that she had met him, it had stimulated her competitive spirit. But there was one thing. In the future, when the Almighty used his charm on her, she had to hold on. She couldn't be easily bewitched. I want to explain. Fujio looked into Chinmo's eyes. Why did you make a move before the National League? She knew that the National League was very important to the Almighty. Not only to the Almighty but to everyone in the Supreme Alliance. Chapter 578. Chinmo's eyes dimmed, replying, So the National League and Li Menggran, which one is the most important to you? It was a multiple-choice question. Fujio couldn't figure out the thoughts of people in love. For instance, if she was really in a relationship with Li Menggran, she would definitely reply that Li Menggran was the most important. But Fujio didn't want to lie. The National League. Fujio added, But you know Li Menggran is my girlfriend. Chinamo arched a brow. There isn't a girlfriend more important than the National League. At least for now. Fujio felt that the Almighty's aura wasn't as cold as before. Chinamo replied faintly, Then it isn't that important. It is important. Fujio wanted to let the Almighty know that she had a reason for taking action. Chinamo didn't speak, but his eyes dimmed again. Then he took off his jacket and threw it on the sofa, leaving only his white shirt on. He rolled up his sleeves and looked at Fujio with his hands in his pockets. He didn't say anything, but his warning was very strong. Fujio wasn't stupid. Noticing the change in the Almighty's gaze, she immediately kept quiet. Just this once. Chinamo walked closer, his gaze deep beneath his long lashes. If there's a next time, I'll lock you up personally. Fujio believed him, but from his words he seemed to have accepted her excuse. Indeed, becoming Li Menggran's boyfriend was a solid excuse. The police would probably talk to Li Menggran. She was only worried about one thing. She hadn't expected to be caught by the Almighty. Hence, she couldn't make any calls. The last step of her plan was to tell Li Menggran not to tell the police about the other party. It wasn't that there would be any danger, but it was inevitable that the police would come to question her. Just as Fujio was deep in her thoughts, she heard a deep and familiar voice. How long do you intend to wear this female outfit for? Fujio lifted her lids, meeting the Almighty's calm gaze. The Almighty frowned slightly as though he didn't like the way she was acting. Fujio understood that a straight man wouldn't be able to accept a man in female clothing. The Almighty was just too straight. However, she wasn't sure. It wasn't that Chinamo was too straightforward, but the way the person in front of him cross-dressed always made him want to do something extreme. Just like before he brought the youngster in. He had thought of too many ways to punish the young man. One of them was to obtain the young man. But he knew very well that once he did that, the two of them would never be able to go back. That was why he stopped. Unfortunately, a certain someone always appeared in front of him like this, without any self-awareness. I'll change it when I get home. Fujio saw the Almighty looking at her, and she understood what he was trying to say. It was better not to dress up in front of the Almighty in the future, or it would remind him of those 2 kisses. Chinamo tugged his collar open and turned his head. Did I say you could go home? Fujio. Was he really going to sleep here? Chapter 579. Fujio took off the sweater that was covering her eyes and didn't say anything. After all, it was safer to change back into men's clothes than women's. She didn't need to worry too much about the bandage on her chest. But if she was going to sleep with the Almighty again, she had to think of an extra layer of protection. So Fujio didn't take off her singlet. But for her, the Almighty's clothes were a bit too big. Especially the sweater, the sleeves had to be rolled up 3 times. Chinamo turned around with his glass in hand and saw the youngster in this state. He was still pulling up his pants, and his face under his silver short hair looked a little depressed, like a child who had stolen an adult's clothes. He leaned against the side, unruffled. Fujio looked up and saw that the Almighty had no intention of helping at all. She curled her thin lips. "This shirt is too big for me. Now you know you are short?" Chinamo took a sip of wine and said slowly, "Ceiling scholar." Fujio's feet slipped and she almost fell. Could the Almighty change his bad habit of giving random nicknames? Chinamo looked down at his lit-up phone screen. "Do you have an answer to the thing I asked you to think about?" "That thing?" Fujio pulled up her long sleeves. "Which thing?" Seeing this, Chinamo put down his glass and walked over. He pulled the youngster's arm and rolled up his sleeves for her. His side profile was handsome and indifferent. "Break up." He enunciated each word in a calm voice. Fujio finally remembered that there was such a thing. But she couldn't agree too quickly, or she would expose herself. So she lowered her head and didn't speak. Chinamo stopped with a faint smile. "What? Can't bear to part with you? This is my first love in name." Fujio was telling the truth. "Brother Imo, I've confessed so many times, but this is the only time I've succeeded." Chinamo tightened his grip. "You know how many times you have confessed to me?" Fujio paused. How could she mention it? This wasn't something to be proud of. "Anyway, it's my first time. Give me some time. This answer shouldn't be wrong." Chinamo paused and said in a deep voice, "One day." "What?" Fujio looked up. Chinamo continued to roll up the youngster's other sleeve. The curve of his face didn't reveal any emotions. "I'll only give you 1 day. Listen carefully, this is the limit." Fujio didn't speak immediately. Chinamo didn't know how many times he had experienced this feeling today. The worry of hearing rejection. Worry? Since when did he have such inexplicable emotions? It wasn't that he didn't feel guilty. She used this as leverage to make the young man break up with her. It was just that he couldn't stand the fact that this guy belonged to a girl. Since it wasn't that important, then he would completely uproot it. Don't give anything a chance to sprout. This time he had learned his lesson. In the future, the youth would only have him by his side. "All right." Fujio tried her best to show her emotions and even her voice was hoarse. "I will try my best to forget." Chinamo glanced at the head that was lowered, the fluffy silver hair swirling around it. He got the answer he wanted. However, he was not in a good mood. Because Chinamo realized that if it was possible, he didn't want the youngster to be so disappointed. Chapter 580. I want to be alone. Fujio continued to pretend. "Go home and think about how to ask Mengran tomorrow. After all, I'm the one who wants to be with you." As soon as the words left her mouth, the temperature in the room was a bit low. Chinamo didn't say anything. Just when Fujio thought she had gotten his consent, she turned to leave. Chinamo reached out his hand and pressed it against the door frame, blocking Fujio's way. He bent his back and lowered his head to get close to her face. A warm breath fell on Fujio's ear again, and she felt an indescribable numbness. "I said I'm tired today." Chinamo paused, and his tone carried a trace of indecipherable emotion. "Is it that bad?" Of course Fujio nodded. "A little." "Then drink some wine." Chinamo pulled the youngster back. "I'll stay with you." Fujio felt that she was one step behind again. She never thought that the Almighty would remember that he was her brother at this time. Anyway, she couldn't leave this time. The two of them opened a bottle of red wine. Fujio didn't drink much. The most important thing was to stay sober. Indeed, there was only one room here. The Almighty didn't even give her a chance to say that she wanted to sleep on the sofa. His eyes were indifferent. "You don't dare to sleep with me? What are you afraid of?" "Brother Imo, why do I feel that you are going to watch me 24 hours a day?" Fujio wasn't stupid. The Almighty wasn't like this for no reason. Chinamo tilted his head and lit a cigarette. Then he took out his phone, unlocked it, and threw it to the person in front of him. Fujio looked at the message on the screen, and her eyes suddenly widened. There was only one line, no more, no less. Tomorrow at 8 in the morning, Z will take action. Fujio raised her eyebrows. The Almighty still hadn't completely dispelled his suspicion towards her. Stay here tonight. Chinemo looked up. I won't be watching you 24 hours a day. Fujio smiled lightly. Okay, for my freedom in the future. This was indeed a chance to clear her name. But what did the person pretending to be her want to do? Fujio knew that the Almighty wouldn't say more. It was already extra that he let her read the message. But sleeping in the same room on the same bed was different from before. When the lights were turned off and the room was plunged into darkness, Fujio could still see the outline of her surroundings clearly through the moonlight. Fujio couldn't fall asleep even though she was fully clothed. How should he put it? Kissing and not kissing were indeed different. Fujio always felt that as soon as that familiar scent approached, the man's eyes when he kissed her lips would appear in her mind. It was very deep like the sea. With this thought in mind, it was inevitable that he would want to retreat. His lips hadn't healed yet, so when the tip of his tongue slid across, he could feel a fine line on the wound. It's a little itchy. As Fujio thought about it, she moved back a little. Suddenly the lights turned on. A tall shadow flipped over and loomed over Fujio's head. That oppressive sense of danger came again. The Almighty's breath was right above her, gently sprinkling down. Fujio felt an indescribable dizziness for the first time. The Almighty was looking at her at such a close distance that when their eyes met, she felt a chill run down her spine. Fujio had to face it head-on. Chapter 581. It's itchy, the weather is cold, and it's hard to get better. Plus today. Fujio didn't finish her sentence, mainly because it was too embarrassing. After being kissed twice, there were still marks left. Chinemo reached out his hand, wanting to touch it with his fingertips. What kind of joke was this, such a position? Fujio sat up directly, otherwise it would be too ambiguous. But in the end, she realized that after she sat up, the position was even more ambiguous. She didn't know what the Almighty was thinking, but the mirror was on the left side of the bed. Fujio tilted her head, just in time to see the two of them in the mirror. That incomparably handsome man had his knees against the bedsheets, his hands on both sides of her, his upper body close to hers, his shirt collar half open, revealing his muscular chest, his voice low and deep. What now? Why don't you say it? Whether from his posture or his appearance, the Almighty's aura was too strong. Fujio didn't speak again because she felt that a lot of inappropriate images would appear in her head just by looking at that scene. It was all because the Almighty was too handsome. That kind of abstinence could easily make people think the wrong way. He seemed to notice Fujio's gaze. Chinemo tilted his head and followed her line of sight. In the mirror, the youngster was trapped under him. The collar of the pure white shirt was slightly askew, revealing a beautiful and delicate collarbone. His skin was white and clean, his thin lips were slightly open, and his eyes were even a little watery because of surprise. Chinmo's eyes deepened when he saw that scene. In fact, whether the youngster was wearing women's or men's clothes, it didn't seem to affect his feelings towards this guy. If he wanted to tear off all his clothes, it would be best if he could leave his mark on every inch of this guy's body, not just his lips but also his ears, neck, collarbone, and any other place that could be left. How strange, he clearly had the same body structure as him. But he couldn't stop that thought. He wanted this guy's legs to wrap around his waist, and he wanted to hear the youngster begging for mercy. Just like what he had thought before entering the room. He wanted to get this person and make him completely his. The sweet smell of the youngster's candy seemed to be urging him to do this. Even his blood was restless. He had already tasted the youngster, so he wanted more. But Chinemo knew that once he did it, he would lose everything. Hence, he moved his palm slowly through the youngster's sweater, dragging her back inch by inch. If you don't sleep, I don't mind throwing you out of the window. I'll show your fans that their beloved little spade not only knows how to scale walls and ceilings, he can also inhale smog. Or perhaps I can teach you something else, like training your kissing skills, MMH. When she felt the warm breath getting closer and closer to her lips, Fujio realized that the textbooks were right. She had to avoid men with excessive hormones. Although the Almighty wasn't gay, what if he saw her too handsome and wanted to hit her? She definitely couldn't suppress him. I'll sleep. Fujio tilted her head seriously, opened her eyes and added, "Good night, brother Imo." Chinemo lowered his head, a look of silent patience flashing across his deep eyes. The youth didn't see her patience behind the black light. Chapter 582. Fujio heard the vibrating sound beside her. When she looked over, Qin Imo had already walked out of the room with his phone in his hand. The call was from Director Huang. His voice was a little deep. This case is a little hard to determine. If you have time, come to the police station tomorrow. Got it. Qin Imo hung up and glanced at the youngster. He didn't walk back and chose to sleep on the sofa. The next day, 8 o'clock. Z on the internet took action as expected. It was just that the result was somewhat unexpected. The maiden's sacrifice in the trailer didn't appear. But some of the images that were exposed still left the police in a terrible state. Fujio didn't have a deep sleep last night. When she woke up, she saw the news on TV. Qin Imo sat on the sofa and pressed the remote control with his fingertips. His tone was indifferent. The person you are imitating seems to be aiming at the same thing as you. Fujio raised her eyebrows. Brother Imo, are you talking about that Z? What do you think the maiden's sacrifice in the trailer is talking about? Qin Imo didn't answer her question. Fujio sat down. I just woke up and you are testing me again? It's a case analysis. Qin Imo placed his hand on the youngster's head. You are 80% free of suspicion. Are you happy? That casual tone, was he really coaxing a child? Or was it just a perfunctory coaxing? Fujio suggested. Can't you find the remaining 20%? It's 25% now. Qin Imo stood up. His side profile was handsome, and even his button-up posture was full of abstinence. I don't like to bargain. Fujio. Inexplicably, it increased by 5%. Go wash up and follow me to the police station. Qin Mo's voice sounded again. It was deep. Fujio was already standing in the bathroom. She lowered her head and squeezed some toothpaste. When she looked up, she met the man's eyes in the mirror. What are we going to do? Get rid of your 20% suspicion. Qin Imo was leaning against the door frame. When the youngster brushed his teeth, he saw that the youngster seemed to avoid his upper lip. He frowned and walked over. He took the youngster's toothbrush and pinched his chin with one hand. Open your mouth. There were still bubbles in Fujio's mouth, but she didn't think that it would affect her handsomeness. I've never asked anyone to brush my teeth for me even when I was young. I couldn't reach the sink, so I moved a stool and stood on it to brush my teeth. Do I need to praise you for being smart and buy you candy? Qin Imo arched his eyebrows. Compared to the pressure, his movements were more gentle. Don't talk, go drink some water. Fujio was very obedient at this time. She basically followed the Almighty's instructions. As the water entered his throat, it made a gurgling sound. At that moment, it was as if the first rays of dawn had become as gentle as water. Qin Imo had always known that the youngster had good skin. However, when the sun shone down on him, the skin on the side of his face was like white jade. His fingertips could still feel the softness and smoothness. He thought that he had really turned completely gay. Because it didn't matter what this guy looked like. He seemed to be starting to lose control of himself. The desire to possess him grew stronger and stronger. It was so strong that when he smelled the youth's aura, his fingers would heat up. But now was not the time to unleash the beast in his heart. Otherwise they wouldn't even be friends. Chapter 583. At 9 a.m. At the entrance of the police station, there was an unprecedented number of media outlets waiting for news. I heard that someone has released news on the internet that they will be one step ahead of the police and find all the people involved in this case. Director Huang, is this true? There are also people who say it's a power exchange. High school students aren't incapable of distinguishing between right and wrong. Why did they agree to it? Is it because of the benefits? Where's the victim? Director Huang wasn't in a position to answer. Could the victim come out and say a few words? Fujio frowned as she listened to the questions. She buttoned up her cap, entering the police station from the side door with the Almighty. If Qin Mo's face were to appear in front of the media, it would definitely cause a commotion. Director Huang understood that, hence, he had arranged for someone to wait at a designated location. The moment Qin Imo entered, he rushed over. It's a troublesome matter, the victim. With that, Director Huang paused, turning towards Fujio. This is my brother. Qin Mo's voice was calm. Speak, the media is already in a frenzy, nothing can be kept a secret. Director Huang wanted to ask when he had a brother, but it wasn't the right time to ask. He glanced at Qin Imo, lowering his voice. The victim's family is here. It seemed like the problem was with the victim's family. The intelligent Qin Mo instantly understood Director Huang's intentions. The two of them followed Director Huang into the lounge. Li Minggran wasn't the only one sitting there, her mother was there as well. She seemed to be in a daze, unable to accept the sudden turn of events. Wu Zhen sat at the side, taking down the statement as though she was making a final confirmation. You're saying that Teacher Yang has always been nice to your daughter? When Fu Jiu heard this question, her hands, which were hidden under her sleeves, started to move. Her eyes turned very dark. Little Wu. Director Huang walked over. Didn't I tell you not to take a statement for now? Wu Zhen hadn't slept the entire day and was exhausted. Just as her face was about to sink, she caught sight of Qin Mo, her voice turning hoarse. A bunch of media outlets are waiting for the outcome of this case. Director Huang, we have dragged this for too long, we have to give everyone an explanation. Besides, the public has the right to know. The public? Li Mengran's mother seemed to have woken up. You mean to tell everyone about this? Wu Zhen comforted him. This is normal procedure. To file a case for investigation, the victim must file a lawsuit. When did we say we were going to sue? Li Mengran's mother stood up agitatedly. If this gets out, how is my daughter going to stay in school? The neighbors will start gossiping, wondering why I have such a daughter. Haven't you considered the consequences? Why do you have to make it public? No one noticed. While she was saying this sentence, Li Mengran's eyes dimmed. Perhaps she should have listened to that person and left last night. In that case, people would always remember that she died to show her determination. Not like now, facing countless cameras and people's curiosity and speculation, as well as her mother's reaction. Auntie. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.